11,000 years ago, give or take, the most famous desert in the world, the Sahara, was all green and alive, with lakes, rivers, grasslands, and forests. Several thousand years later, it all changed. But then, in 1877, a Scottish businessman, Donald Mackenzie, got the ambitious idea to create a sea right in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Mackenzie thought he could dig a channel from a lagoon near Cape Juby in northwestern Africa south to a large island plain. He thought this area was very low, about 200 feet below sea level. If he flooded it with water from the Atlantic Ocean, he believed it would create a giant inland sea, about the size of 60,000 square miles. His idea was to use the new sea for commercial navigation to West Africa, which had plenty of valuable resources and markets with huge profits. Even though Mackenzie had never visited the Sahara himself, he read about other dry desert areas below sea level, like Tunisia and Egypt, which had salt lakes called chats. But the businessman was wrong about how elevated the plain was and didn't receive enough investment, so he didn't bring his project to life. A French geographer named François L. Roder and a diplomat who developed the Suez Canal came up with a similar idea a year later. Roder was inspired by Greek historian and geographer Herodotus, who mentioned the Bay of Triton in his writings. It's sort of an Atlantis of Africa, as there is no proof it really existed, and no one can tell where exactly it was located. The salt plain could have been the seabed of the Bay of Triton, and they could bring this sea back to life. So the French crew thought they could dig a channel from the Mediterranean Sea into a seasonal salt lake in present-day Tunisia. Water would flow into dry basins and create an inland sea. They were hoping it would be around 3,000 square miles in area and 75 feet deep. It would definitely require a huge amount of water. The new sea was supposed to turn the dry desert into a flourishing garden. The climate in the area would become cooler, and there would be more rainfall in the region. And here comes the best part for the French. They'd replace trade caravans with steamships and generate more profit. The cost of this project would be almost $1 billion in today's money. Some people got worried that this new sea would create swamps full of dangerous bacteria. The French authorities stopped the project when they found out that many areas that would be involved were not below sea level, and the plan was just impossible. Now, some people were also afraid it could tilt the Earth on its axis in a dangerous way, or cool down Europe to the point there would be a new ice age. But the idea lived on, and most recently, Egypt was considering flooding the Qattara Depression in eastern Sahara through a canal or tunnels from the Mediterranean Sea. Water would evaporate quickly because of the desert climate, and a controlled balance of inflow and evaporation would let them generate huge amounts of hydroelectric power. But the project involved using atomic power to carve the new channel, and it didn't come to be. Famous writer Jules Verne described the flooding of the Sahara in his final novel, Invasion of the Sea. In the book, the scientists didn't proceed with their plans to turn the desert into a sea, but an earthquake did the job for them. So if the book comes to life, we might go swimming at a new Sahara Sea resort in the future. Another massive flooding project has to do with Lake Eyre in Australia. When it fills up completely, it becomes the largest lake on the continent. It happens only a few times a century, and when it does, the lake has the same salinity as seawater. When it dries up, it becomes extra salty. There was an idea to flood Lake Eyre with seawater using a big canal or pipeline. It was supposed to make more water evaporate, and it could bring more rain to nearby areas. But when scientists did their math, they saw that the extra rainfall would be very small. It is so tricky because Lake Eyre is below sea level, and the area gets really hot, so lots of water evaporates every year. This means salt would build up very quickly, and the canal could get blocked by all the salt. If a big canal sent water to the lake, it could create a small sea, but without removing the salty water, the lake would collect tons of salt every year. In 1930, several British scientists suggested freeing 100,000 square miles of the North Sea from water. Huge dams were supposed to stop the water, and rivers flowing into that sea would be diverted somewhere else through canals. There would be a railroad connecting London to Berlin and a bridge across the English Channel. Antwerp and London would keep their access to the sea, and Rotterdam would lose its busy port. This idea never became a reality, but quite recently, one Dutch and one German scientist came up with a similar project. Their idea is to build a dam that would be 295 miles long between North Scotland and West Norway, and another section between West France and southwest England. The scientists did some math and figured out that the project would cost somewhere between $276 and $552 billion. Sounds like a lot of money, but it could save around 25 million people living in 14 European countries from high water. So if we spread that budget over 20 years, the cost would be 0.1% of their combined GDP. And although it looks like science fiction, we already have the technology to build something like that. The depth of the North Sea between France and England is hardly over 328 feet and is around 416 feet between Scotland and Norway. We can already build fixed platforms in depth over 1,600 feet, so it should be fine. This project would turn most of the North Sea into a huge freshwater lake with no tides, and it would mean huge changes in its ecosystem. Plus, it would become more expensive to ship goods across this sea. The fishing industry would lose huge amounts of money, and it would also cost a lot to build huge pumps to transfer all of the river water that currently flows into the North Sea to the other side of the dam. So, the best that scientists can do is monitor the situation and hope there won't be a need for such a dam. Meanwhile, a German architect and engineer came up with another huge dam idea in the 1930s. It was supposed to completely change the inside of Africa with giant inland seas. The plan was to build a huge dam on the Congo River where it flows through some deep, narrow valleys after joining with the Kwa River. This would create a massive lake that would be bigger than the states of California, Nevada, and Oregon combined. Once this giant lake filled up, it would overflow into another river, which would then pour into the Sherry River, one of the rivers that feeds Lake Chad. Lake Chad would grow much larger, just like it was believed to be 10,000 years ago. The water would flow from the lake through Algeria and Tunisia right into the Mediterranean Sea. This new river would be big enough for ships to travel. It could replace trains or planes and would make it much easier to move goods and people across Africa. Back then, people didn't think much about how this could hurt nature and focused on how it would help the economy. So, a few years ago, in 2019, folks in Australia said they liked an old idea with a new twist, using extra floodwater from the north to help dry areas in the west and south. This plan got the name of the new Bradfield scheme. It was based on an old idea from the 1930s. The idea was to catch floodwater from the north and move it to the south and west. But the original plan never actually happened. Over the years, lots of experts said it wouldn't work. They thought it was too expensive and too tricky to build, even though it could potentially help fix drought problems in dry parts of Queensland. The original idea appeared a long time ago, when an engineer named John Bradfield got a big idea. He wanted to take floodwater from rivers in northern Queensland and send it inland to Lake Eyre, one of the driest spots in Australia. He planned to use dams, pumps, really big pipes, and even tunnels to transport all that water over the Great Dividing Range, a big mountain range in Australia. The biggest dam would have been called Hell's Gate, and Bradfield wanted it twice as tall as what it was originally planned. This way, pumps and gravity could help move the water over the Great Dividing Range. The water would then flow south and help irrigate farmland near places like Hughenden. It would change the weather, make it rain more, and turn the dry land into green farms. Eventually, it would reach Lake Eyre, turning the desert into a green growing area. That way, Australia could grow more food, sell it to other countries, and make more jobs. He hoped that the area could turn into a food bowl for the country. For some time, people talked about the plan a lot. They loved the idea. They thought it could change how farming worked. and some even believe that nature had already planned for the land to be filled with water. Dry rivers and lake beds were just waiting to be used. They even said that rains fell on the wrong side of the mountains, and Bradfield's plan could fix that. But when the authorities looked into this idea, they found big problems, and the main one was that the plan would cost too much. Plus, there weren't enough scientists or engineers to do a full investigation. The land was too dry and harsh. No one was sure it would even work, like how much water would really get there. Plus, some of Bradfield's measurements were wrong, especially the dam heights. So, in 1947, they officially shut the project down, claiming that even if they built the project, it wouldn't be worth it. After all, even places next to oceans, like parts of Chile, still stay bone dry, so a big lake might not result in more rain. And still, in 2019, one political party brought the idea back with an updated version called the new Bradfield scheme. They wanted to try it again, but with some changes to make it work better. Their plan included the following steps. Take water from the South Johnstone, Tully, Herbert, and Burdekin rivers. Store that water using a big dam called Hell's Gate Dam, but this time they wanted to make the dam twice as tall as in the original plan. Let the water flow through tunnels using gravity instead of using lots of pumps. Move the water under the mountains and into the Warrego River in southern Queensland. Use the water to grow crops in dry places south and west of Hughenden, a huge area even bigger than Tasmania, eventually turning it into a food bowl. At the same time, they didn't say how much the whole project would cost, but they promised to spend $20 million to let Australia's National Science Agency check if the plan could work. Those innovative ideas sounded good, but for over 80 years, loads of experts kept saying, "Nope, it won't work." Why? Bradfield said his idea would cost £40 million back in 1941. That's about $3.2 billion today. But the new version of the plan might cost more than $15 billion and take over 10 years to build. Also, people who care about nature are worried. They explain that taking water away from where it usually goes could hurt animals and plants. It might let invasive plants and animals spread to new places. It might mess up rivers and oceans, where fish and other animals live. It could even hurt towns and businesses near the coast that depend on those natural water flows. Still, some people really believed in the idea and thought it was worth doing, especially to help farmers and fix drought problems. However, in 2022, the government decided to stop trying to fix the drought in western Queensland with the Bradfield scheme. Experts looked closely at the plan and said it just wouldn't work. The problem? There's not enough water all the time to make it happen. Apparently, the new cost of the plan would have been over $30 billion. That's a huge amount of money. You could buy yourself a fleet of private jets and luxurious yachts, and more. So experts said you'd need lots and lots of water to spend that kind of money, but the water just isn't there. Now, instead of one huge project, they suggested doing smaller water projects closer to where the rain and waterfalls are. These smaller projects, called mini Bradfield grids, would be in 4 places along the Queensland coast. Those little grids could share water when some places had more or less rain. Other scientists looked at the plan too, and they agreed. Even if things went super well, the Bradfield scheme would still cause problems and cost way too much, while the mini water grids project looks more plausible. They think the dry parts west of the mountains will do better without the full-scale Bradfield scheme. There are easier and cheaper ways to help those places grow and get water. So the big plan was dropped, and now they're looking at smarter, smaller ideas to help with water and farming. And the matter is quite urgent. Australia is a super dry place, one of the driest places people actually live in. When there's a drought, there's not much water around. That means farms don't grow as much food, and that can cause a lot of problems. In the future, droughts are likely to happen more often and be worse. That's why it's necessary to start getting ready now. Experts are working on something called the Drought Resilience Mission, trying to figure out how to deal with droughts better in the future. One of them looked at how much droughts actually cost Australia. His research shows that droughts can hurt a lot of things – farms, jobs, towns, and even the whole country. When there's no rain for a really long time, some towns can actually run out of water. That's called day zero. It's when the taps in people's houses get turned off because there's just no water left. In 2020, a town in Queensland called Stanthorpe hit day zero. About 50 other towns were really close too. When such a situation happens, the only way to get water is by bringing it in with trucks, and that's super expensive. Stanthorpe had to get around 20 trucks of water every day for a year and a half. It cost them about $800,000 every month. In the end, they spent over $14 million just to have water. Luckily, it started raining again and filled the dams back up. But the authorities are working on ways to stop this kind of thing from happening again. They want to help towns be ready so they never run out of water like that. Because drought just doesn't mess with water, it can also mess with people's health. When everything dries up, plants vanish and the soil gets loose. Then the wind picks it up and makes huge dust storms. Those dust clouds can blow really far, even into such big cities as Sydney. That's what happened in 2018. The air got so bad that kids, older people, and anyone with breathing problems had to be extremely careful. The dust ruined some crops and made different foods, even fruit, unsafe to eat.
There's a country that runs on volcanoes, rivers, and lakes for power. Sounds like a fantasy game setting, but it's all true. Welcome to New Zealand. This island nation already gets about 85% of its electricity from renewable resources like hydro, geothermal, and wind. That's impressive, but it's actually just getting started. Now, let's zoom in on a place called the South Taranaki Bight. It's a stretch of sea off the west coast of the North Island. At first glance, it looks just like any other tropical postcard location, but it's hiding New Zealand's clean energy jackpot. It's all about the South Taranaki Offshore Wind Project. This game changer in the world of green power will build wind turbines in the ocean, enough to generate almost 1 gigawatt of clean electricity. That's roughly enough to power over 430,000 homes. To put that into perspective, that's almost a quarter of all the households in New Zealand. If the country can pull this off, it won't just become greener. It'll kickstart an entirely new profitable industry – offshore wind. It means over 600 new jobs in construction, operations, and maintenance. And these jobs are future-proof. The kind that won't disappear as the world moves away from oil and gas. It also means more tech development for the country, and of course, more energy independence. Experts also believe it will secure more business investment in New Zealand, and the entire offshore wind sector should bring in around $30 billion to the country's GDP between now and 2050. The South Taranaki Bight is a perfect location for this project. It gets consistent, powerful winds, not stormy and chaotic, but steady and useful. That's exactly what you want for wind turbines. And the seabed here is deep, but not too deep, which is ideal for turbine platforms. They usually build traditional wind turbines on land or in shallow water where they can stand on firm foundations. But the ones planned here are offshore wind turbines, which means engineers can install them in deeper water, further from land, and in stronger wind zones. The electricity the turbines generate will move to a major onshore connection point through cables. From there, it will travel via national grid infrastructure to power homes, businesses, and industry. To make all this happen, the project team has already laid the groundwork. One of the coolest things they've done so far is a floating LiDAR campaign. LiDAR means light detection and ranging. And it's like radar, but with lasers. They put this high-tech gear on a floating buoy that stays in the ocean for months. It collects crazy precise data about wind speeds, wave patterns, sea temperature, currents. That's all the stuff you need to plan an offshore power plant. If the project works out, it will take New Zealand to a new green level. Right now, the country still uses fossil fuels during peak demand times, or when the hydro lakes run low. Most of those fossil fuels come from overseas, and they're expensive, polluting, and unreliable. But if offshore wind goes big, it could plug those energy gaps, especially during winter when winds are stronger and electricity use spikes. And if New Zealand produces more clean energy than it needs, it could start exporting it as green hydrogen. It's hydrogen made from water using renewable electricity, which is really healthy for our planet. The South Taranaki offshore wind project, if all goes well, will be more than a local win. It'll be a blueprint, a model other regions of New Zealand could follow. There are wind-rich areas all around the country's coastline, and floating offshore technology makes them more accessible than ever. Some scientists believe New Zealand could build up to 8 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2050. That's 8 times what's being planned in Taranaki right now. Imagine what that could do. Clean energy for the whole country, plus exports, plus global leadership in a brand new industry. Of course, it's not all smooth sailing, and there are some challenges on the way. First, there's marine life. Any large ocean project needs to be careful about how it affects whales, dolphins, fish, and seabirds. That's why scientists are studying marine baseline in the early planning stages to map out the local ecosystem and avoid any harm to it. They've already started this process in the Taranaki Bight and are gathering information so turbines can be placed where they'll do the least damage. There's also a high cost. Offshore wind is more expensive than onshore right now, but costs are dropping as the tech improves and scales up. Plus, the long-term benefits, cleaner air, local jobs, energy security, make it worth it. And then there are potential problems with authorities, local tribes, iwi, and the community. They all must support the project for it to become a reality, and it's not always working out. For example, when a 34-page review article about the risks of the wind farms for the environment came out, local authorities were reviewing it. But if everything goes well, construction in the South Taranaki Bight could begin in the late 2020s. Iceland is a great example of a country where green, renewable energy works and rules. 9 out of 10 homes in this country stay warm thanks to underground geothermal heat. Thanks to its wild geology with volcanoes, hot springs, and glaciers, Iceland is packed with natural energy. It sits right on a super active part of the Earth's crust, where 2 tectonic plates meet. That's why it has so much geothermal power and hot water just bubbles up from below. Glaciers cover 11% of the country, and when they melt in the warmer months, they feed rivers that flow down from the mountains. That water's energy is turned into hydropower. Plus, Iceland also has lots of wind power potential. They just haven't tapped into it much yet. The only major thing still using fossil fuels in Iceland is transport, like cars and planes. But it wasn't always this way. Not long ago, Iceland relied mostly on imported oil and coal, especially before the 1970s. Back then, they mostly used geothermal energy for bathing and washing clothes. The change came when oil prices went up like crazy, and Iceland realized importing fuel was just too risky and expensive. The country needed its own stable, affordable energy. One farmer figured out how to use natural hot water to heat his home. Local communities followed his lead, and soon towns were drilling deeper underground to get even hotter water. That hot water then went through pipes around neighborhoods and heated entire towns. It worked so well that the authorities set up a special fund to give out loans for geothermal drilling. Others started building small hydro plants. By 1950, Iceland had over 500 tiny hydropower stations powering farms and villages. Later, the authorities stepped in again to attract big international companies. If Iceland could offer cheap green power, maybe new industries would move in, create jobs, and help grow the economy. That plan worked, and it also helped build a country-wide power grid. And it was all possible, not just because Iceland has amazing natural resources, but also thanks to teamwork of the authorities and regular citizens. A lot of countries today face the same problems. Nepal, for example, has tons of hydropower potential, but needs investment. Countries in East Africa have loads of underground geothermal energy, but not enough training or tech to use it. Iceland has been sharing what they know for decades. Since 1979, over 1,000 people from other countries have gone there to study geothermal energy. Icelandic companies have helped build geothermal systems in more than 50 countries, including the world's biggest one in China, which now heats homes for over 1 million people. And you don't even need volcanoes to use geothermal energy. New technology means you can use lower temperatures to heat and cool buildings. Paris, for example, has one of Europe's largest geothermal heating systems. Around 25% of Europeans live in places where this tech could work.
I've made a list of some of the creepiest abandoned projects in the world. There's everything from ghost scrapers to bygone amusement parks. Fancy a tour? If you've ever seen Martin Scorsese's Shutter Island, you know how Eyre Islands can be extremely creepy. Even though this abandoned place looks like the set of a horror movie, it's as real as it gets. The so-called Hashima Island lies 9 miles from the city of Nagasaki. It's been abandoned for almost 50 years. You see, when humans leave buildings unoccupied and unattended in deserted areas for quite some time, nature usually takes over. Judging by the looks of it today, I would have never guessed that Hashima Island was a hub for undersea coal mining. All the coal extracted from the area would be shipped to the rest of Japan to fuel the country's swift industrialization process. But mineral resources are finite, we know that. So, when the coal reserves started to empty, there was not so much for people to do around the area. Which leads us back to today. If you're feeling adventurous, you can take a boat ride from Nagasaki to Hashima Island and experience this dystopian sci-fi city firsthand. You'll tour empty apartment buildings overtaken by grass and be served away from any possible collapsing buildings. Sounds like a great idea for a Sunday. What do you say? This is what I like to call Disney, but with a dark twist. In 2014, a group of developers thought it would be a great idea to build a luxurious villa of Disney-like castles in the middle of a Turkish forest area. They were aiming for upper-class Europeans who had something from 375,000 to 500,000 euros in their pockets to invest in the endeavor. Since it was built near a town known for its hot springs, the owners of these luxurious condos could even enjoy their own jacuzzis filled with rehabilitating waters. The thing is, the public didn't love the idea. Some started to complain that the architecture was far from the classic Ottoman style of the region, while others thought the company cut too many trees to build this fairy tale town. In the end, the developers accumulated so many fines that it had to declare bankruptcy, and the project was abandoned. They didn't tear the castles down, though, so it just looks like a twisted live-action Disney movie over there. Now, skyscrapers are neat, but have you ever seen the world's tallest ghost scraper? The Golden Finance 117 was supposed to be the centerpiece of the Golden Metropolitan Scheme, a sprawling man-made town owned by billionaire Paine Su-tong. The mini-city would be a residential and commercial hub, minutes away from downtown Tianjin. It would be filled with French and Italian-style manors, a polo club, and even a wine museum. The developers were certainly aiming to attract the super-rich. The 128-floor building was envisioned as the mini-city's crown jewel. And I mean that literally, since the top of the building would be shaped like a diamond. Construction started back in 2008, and it still hasn't been finished. The overall project was estimated to cost $10 billion, but because of several unfortunate events, it never fully materialized. Some say that the project was probably doomed from the start, since the people who could afford to live somewhere like that wouldn't want to pay so much to live in a second-tier industrial city. Oh, and as you might remember, there was a big economic recession back in 2008 that really slowed things down. Still, this enormous ghost scraper was the 5th tallest building in the world at the time. Now, if you had to pick 3 words synonymous with utopia, what would you choose? I'd say things like happiness, peace, and abundance. This meant-to-be utopian city couldn't be further away from these qualities, though. Welcome to the Mojave Desert, located in California. Can you see the city grid on the sandy ground? These lines are the remains of a utopian city that never made it to its final stage. This town was supposed to be called California City. The utopian town was envisioned by Nate Mendelsohn, a university professor who studied a lot about urban planning. The project began in the late 1950s when he bought over 80,000 acres of land in the desert. He thought of a place where families would thrive. At the time, housing was affordable, and the town came equipped with leisure options such as a golf course, swimming pool, and recreation fields. Some people did buy lots over there, but the project was interrupted. That's why, if you're driving outside of LA, you might see a small island of houses, which is a tiny fraction of what California City was supposed to be. What European country would you say is filled with abandoned places? If you said Spain, then you got it right. Let's name a few. What was once planned to be a luxury resort is now a graffiti haven. The place started to be built in 1969, but just a year later, construction halted. In Ibiza, you'll also find something called the Festival Club. You see, Ibiza wasn't always the party place it is today. This club opened its doors in 1972, but 2 years later, Spain lived through a big oil crisis and fewer tourists went to visit the island. The club was eventually abandoned, and today, visitors come to check out the graffiti art. The exterior of the houses is in perfect shape, which makes it hard to believe that all these houses were left to their own luck. According to the explorer who found them, they've been abandoned since 2008, again, that terrible year of recession. The company that built it went broke in the final quarter of construction of the condo and abandoned the project at its very final stage. What a sad ending. Now, in Miami Beach, you'll find a luxurious abandoned hotel that once hosted a Beatles concert. In the late 1950s, it was the go-to spot for celebrities such as Frank Sinatra. Today, the Deauville Resort has already been demolished. It was shut down in 2017 after a fire damaged some of the building structures. For a while, they decided to leave the hotel as it was, with its furniture and memorabilia still inside. Let's see what it looked like. The main entrance and lobby gave out a lot of 1950s vibe. The kitchen was still equipped with dishware and cutlery. The bathrooms had stalls and hairdryers available for use. And one could find electronic room keys thrown all over the floor. The hotel's main ballroom was where the magic used to happen. In 1964, the Beatles played a concert there that drove thousands of unticketed fans to stand outside, waiting to get a glimpse of the stars. The Deauville might have been a huge part of American cultural history, but today, it's nothing more than an abandoned site. Now, there is no doubt that some of the most interesting abandoned places in the world were once amusement parks. Amusement parks are usually filled with so much laughter and joyful times. But not these ones. Neri Dreamland was meant to be Japan's Disney World, but the project failed with time. Today, Neri Dreamland is nothing but a dream. If you were visiting it before it was taken down, this is what you would see. Your heart would beat faster than usual when you passed a fog-covered roller coaster. Was that meant to be the Matterhorn? Yup. Everything about this place said you shouldn't be there. But you're too curious. Tossed on the park's floor, you would see reels of tickets and disfigured stuffed animals. Fancy walking through an empty diner? It's bizarre how the tables and stools were left in place. Walking through what was once a gift shop, you would see empty shelves and an old-school cash machine. Now, are you as disturbed as I am after watching this? Yikes!
You're standing in the middle of a vast, empty desert in Saudi Arabia. But in the middle of that emptiness, two enormous mirrored skyscrapers rise side by side, in perfect parallel to each other. This isn't just some sci-fi concept, it's the line, the centerpiece of Saudi Arabia's boldest urban project yet. Now, Saudi Arabia is already home to some of the most ambitious architecture in the world, from Riyadh's King Abdullah Financial District to the iconic Abraj Al Bayt Towers in Mecca. They've been working hard for years. But the line is in a league of its own. This project was announced in 2021. and it is part of a larger vision for the country's future called Neom, a $500 billion megaproject designed to redefine how people live, work, and interact with the environment. I mean, what could go wrong, right? Well, I don't know. But Nadmi Al-Nasser, the longtime chief executive of the ambitious project, has recently departed. Suspicious. Even more so because Neom's statement issued soon after did not give any plausible reason for his departure. Then, the line project itself was originally expected to cost around $200 billion. But by 2024, that number had skyrocketed to a mind-blowing $2 trillion. That's about twice Saudi Arabia's entire GDP. And if you ask independent experts, they think it could end up costing even more. At first, the plan was to build about 10 miles of the project and have 1.5 million people living there by 2030. By now, the expectations are way more modest. Only just under 1.5 miles are likely to be done by 2030, with fewer than 300,000 residents. The project has come across a lot of problems along the way. Engineering issues and management problems have caused major delays, and progress hasn't been as fast as hoped. And now, let's figure out what exactly is the line. It's a literal city made up of 2 parallel skyscrapers, each towering 1,640 feet high. That's higher than almost all the tallest skyscrapers in the world. These skyscrapers are 656 feet wide and stretch for a mind-boggling 106 miles across the northwest of Saudi Arabia, right near the Red Sea. The most astounding thing? The entire city is actually within this one structure. There are no cars, no roads, no emissions. But we'll go into detail a bit later. The complex is supposed to house 9 million people, and all of this running entirely on clean energy. Such a project aligns perfectly with Saudi Arabia's ambitious Vision 2030 plan. The outside of the skyscrapers will be covered in mirrors that will reflect the surrounding desert landscape, creating an almost seamless blend between the city and its surroundings. Inside, there will be lush parks, cascading waterfalls, flying taxis, and even robot helpers to take care of everyday tasks. They're also planning to make an artificial moon as part of the city's design. One more thing that makes the line so unique is its design. Unlike traditional cities that spread out horizontally, the line is vertical. Everything, homes, offices, parks, schools, shopping centers, are stacked on top of each other in layers. This means that residents won't need to travel long distances to get what they need. In fact, the designers promise that all amenities will be within a 5-minute walk from anywhere in the city. And while it's compact in width, the city's vertically layered structure means it can comfortably fit all 9 million residents, while leaving plenty of room for parks, natural spaces, and modern conveniences. There's even a plan for year-round climate control, keeping both indoor and outdoor spaces at comfortable temperatures, no matter how harsh the desert weather gets. Of course, even with everything close by, people will still need to get around the city. Worry not, the line has it covered in the most futuristic way possible. It features a high-speed train system that will travel from one end of the city to the other in just 20 minutes. That's 106 miles in 20 minutes with only 4 stops along the way. Imagine being able to get anywhere in the city faster than you could drive across town in most places today. Besides the train, the line will also have autonomous vehicles. Those will be cars and shuttles driving themselves with the help of advanced technology. They will handle everything from parking to going around obstacles. Even cooler, in the line, every car, train, and any other piece of infrastructure will be connected in a huge network called the Internet of Things. Sensors and real-time data will allow traffic to flow smoothly, preventing delays and reducing congestion. They first spoke about the Neom project in 2017. Besides the line, Neom is supposed to include an octagon-shaped floating industrial city and a posh mountain ski resort. There, Saudi Arabia will host the Asian Winter Games in 2029. Plus, there will be the world's largest green energy plant, which will make the region self-sufficient and sustainable. The goal of Neom is to attract people from around the world, not just to visit, but to live there. Residents will even be given their own identity, Neomians. Not everyone thinks this construction is a good idea. Some urban planners and architects have pointed out pretty big flaws in the city's straight-line layout. You see, in a regular city like Johannesburg, which covers way more ground than the line, two random people are usually only about 20 miles apart. But in the line, the average distance between two random people would be 35 miles. That's almost double, even though the line's overall area is way smaller. This setup could make it harder for people to connect socially and might be a pain to navigate, even with a high-speed train zipping through it. Now, they promise that every resident will have everything they need within a 5-minute walk, but there are doubts too. People wonder if living in a super compact, stacked-up design might end up feeling claustrophobic or even too much to handle. As for the whole mirrored exterior idea, it looks pretty cool in renderings. But there's an opinion it could actually mess with the environment. Reflecting all that sunlight in a desert might disturb local wildlife or create unexpected heat issues. The line's high-tech features sound amazing, but they come with their own set of headaches. The city is supposed to run on the Internet of Things tech and autonomous vehicles. Sounds awesome, right? But how are they going to pull that off for a 106-mile-long city? For things to run smoothly, every piece of tech, cars, trains, infrastructure, needs to be perfectly in sync, sharing tons of real-time data. If there's even a tiny glitch, it could throw a wrench into daily life for millions of people. Then there's that high-speed train. It does sound like a dream, but actually building and keeping it running in the middle of a desert is not so easy. The heat, shifting sands, and wear and tear on the tracks could cause big delays and rack up costs pretty quickly. People around the world are questioning if the line is even doable. The first inhabitants were supposed to start living there by 2030, but there are reports about scaling the project back, so that deadline feels like a big stretch. There's also a sustainability issue. The line is supposed to have zero emissions and 100% clean energy. But building something so massive is bound to take tons of resources. With all these challenges, Saudi Arabia is looking into new ways to fund the line and figure out which parts of their Vision 2030 projects to prioritize. An insider has recently said that some projects might go ahead as planned, while others could be delayed or scaled down. This lines up with what Ali Shahabi, who's on Neom's advisory board, has said. He admitted that the Vision 2030 goals were always meant to be super ambitious. Like, almost too ambitious. But he argued that even if they only pull off part of it in time, it'll still be a big deal. In Asia, there's a bridge that is way longer than you'd think should even be possible. The HZMB stretches 34 miles over open water, which makes it the longest sea bridge in the world. So if something this massive can make it across rough waters, why can't New Zealand just build a bridge between its two main islands? After all, we're talking about a distance of just 14 miles. And a bridge like that could seriously change life for both locals and tourists. People could just hop in a car and drive from Wellington to Picton. No more ferry hassles, no more drawn-out trips. Just one epic road journey with ocean views on both sides. So what's stopping them? Well, turns out, everything. I mean, building a bridge there is technically possible, but there are a couple reasons why experts are like, maybe not. Let's start with the obvious, the distance. The North Island and the South Island are separated by Cook Strait. Like I said, it's 14 miles wide at its narrowest point. That's not much, true. Plus, we've got the HZMB bridge, proving that, yep, it is technically possible to build a bridge over the sea to cover that distance. But we can't ignore the fact that New Zealand's geography is, well, a whole different ballgame. Cook Strait isn't exactly a calm, friendly stretch of water. It's deep, really deep. Parts of it drop to about 10,000 feet. That's like stacking 7 Empire State Buildings on top of each other. It's also a rough, moody stretch of ocean that loves tossing around ships like rubber ducks. In fact, quite a few have been wrecked in Cook Strait. And sadly, many lives were lost. You don't have to worry about it so much though, as the worst accidents happened a long time ago. The ships and ferries that cross it today are much safer. Even so, it'd be pretty hard to avoid getting seasick while crossing it. Things get even messier below the surface. The seafloor over there is uneven and unpredictable. What happens is that Cook Strait has opposing tides at each end, one where it meets the Tasman Sea and the other where it joins the Pacific Ocean. And they simply don't move together like you might expect. When the tide is high on one side, it's low on the other, and they're totally out of sync. So all that water rushes back and forth through the strait to balance things out, creating some really strong and messy currents in the middle. Then there's the weather. Cook Strait isn't just windy, it's probably one of the windiest places in the southern hemisphere. That's because it's located right in the middle of one of New Zealand's 3 big wind tunnels. Basically, there are places where the wind doesn't just come and go quickly. It sticks around, blowing hard for most of the year. And all of this happens because of something called the Roaring Forties. That's the name for the latitude band between 40 and 50 degrees south of the equator, where strong, persistent westerly winds are pretty common. Unlike the northern hemisphere, which has a lot of land at this latitude, the southern hemisphere is mostly ocean with just a few land masses, like New Zealand's South Island, Tasmania, and the southern tip of South America. So, these winds go wild because there's nothing to slow them down, and they just keep picking up speed. The gusts there can reach up to 150 miles per hour. So, imagine trying to cross a bridge in a car when the wind is actively pushing against you. That's not just unpleasant, it's super dangerous. Drivers can easily lose control of their cars with the wind pushing them sideways. And of course, that can lead to countless serious accidents. Now, let's talk about earthquakes. New Zealand sits right on the boundary of 2 massive tectonic plates, the Indo-Australian and Pacific plates. It's basically in the middle of a collision zone. And about 14,000 earthquakes happen in and around the country every year. Of those, only about 200 are big enough to be felt. Still, building a massive bridge under these conditions would require some serious genius-level engineering. With all that in mind, we can safely say that the whole bridge idea is off the table. But how about an underwater tunnel? Yep, that could work. It could be a great solution actually. No wind, no bad weather, and no earthquakes to deal with. There are a bunch of other advantages too. First, it would dramatically reduce travel time, cutting down the 3 to 4 hour sailing trip between the North and South Islands. That same journey would probably only take about 40 minutes. Then people wouldn't have to stress about all the ferry cancellations and delays because of bad weather. And most importantly, it's doable. I mean, look at the Channel Tunnel. It's an undersea tunnel connecting southern England and northern France. Japan did something similar with the Seikan Tunnel, which connects the islands of Honshu and Hokkaido. They are both huge projects, serving pretty much the same purpose. So why on earth isn't New Zealand already building this tunnel? Well, for the same reason we don't all live in luxury treehouses with personal robots: money. Estimates vary, but some experts think a project like this could cost anywhere from $10 to $20 billion. To cover that kind of cost, they'd probably need to charge tolls for the next 100 years. And trust me, those tolls wouldn't be cheap. Other experts think it could actually cost more than that. Because you see, we have to consider all the extra infrastructure. The narrowest point of Cook Strait is between the North Island and Arapawa Island. That's one of the long, mountainous regions in the Marlborough Sounds, which is pretty remote. So it's not just about the cost of the bridge or tunnel itself, it's also the access roads, safety systems, maintenance, and evacuation plans. You can't just build a huge underwater tunnel and not plan for the occasional emergencies. And what would it actually be used for? Sure, there are people who travel between the islands. About 1 million passengers take the ferry every year. But that's not exactly the kind of traffic that justifies the most expensive infrastructure project in the country's history. Earlier, we talked about how England and Japan have similar underwater tunnels. But there's something to consider. The United Kingdom has a population of 69 million. Japan has even more, with around 123 million people. And in New Zealand, they've only got 5 million residents to pay for this project. So could they have a tunnel under Cook Strait? Sure they could. Should they? Probably not. If you don't want to fly, the only other way to travel between the islands is by ferry. It's not ideal, but hey, it works. New Zealand has a total of 5 ships that transport people and vehicles across the islands. For tourists who aren't in a rush, it's perfect. You can cross the islands while taking in some of the most stunning views and spotting amazing wildlife. You'll start your trip in Wellington, and right from there, you'll see the rugged North Island coastline as you head out into open water. You might see different seabirds like gulls and terns, and as you get closer to the South Island, you might spot some gannets. If you're lucky, you could also catch a glimpse of the seal colonies off the coast. During the last hour of the trip, the ferry will slow down, giving you plenty of time to enjoy the green hills and calm waters. You will also approach Queen Charlotte Sound, a spot known for its wildlife. So keep an eye out for orcas, playful dolphins, and even penguins. Honestly, having a ferry instead of a tunnel might not be so bad after all.
If you've ever been to Yellowstone National Park, you were probably mesmerized by its geysers, which spew superheated water and steam high into the air. But an even more intriguing thing actually hides underground. I'm talking about that underfoot plumbing system that makes those grand eruptions possible. About that, there's good news. Recently, researchers have succeeded in mapping the national park's hydrothermal plumbing system with the help of a giant flying magnet. As a result, scientists have managed to document all these features in stunning detail. The thing is, Yellowstone houses the world's largest hydrothermal system. It contains over 10,000 features, like geysers, mud pots, hot springs, and steam vents. They're fed by a network of underground water pathways. Those get overheated by magma flowing underground. It causes the water to rise to the surface. Now, no one actually knows much about the workings of this system, but the newly created maps might finally shed light on it. Experts explain that their knowledge of Yellowstone has a subsurface gap. That's why it's often called a mystery sandwich. Scientists know quite a lot about the features on the surface because they can observe them directly. And they know what's going on in the magmatic and tectonic system several miles below the surface. But they haven't figured out what's happening in the middle yet. So, I must tell you about that giant flying magnet used for research. It's known as SkyTem. It was attached to a helicopter and flown over Yellowstone several hundred times, scanning the ground below. The magnet is made up of an 82-foot wide charged wire loop. Its main task is to generate a strong electromagnetic field. And since different kinds of material, like water or rock, respond to this field differently, scientists managed to create a few subsurface maps for the first time ever. The mapping technique also allowed the researchers to differentiate between magma and bedrock, since they have a bit different magnetic properties. And the team got a chance to see how the magma and water interact and create those mind-blowing geological features on the surface. The team got high-resolution maps to a depth of around 500 and 2,300 feet, and low-resolution maps showing what's going on at a depth of up to 1.5 miles. At the same time, the researchers think that the hydrothermal system itself may stretch as far as 3 miles below the surface. If they're right, it means they've only mapped the top half of Yellowstone's plumbing system. Anyway, remember how I said that scientists know pretty much about the bottom part of the Yellowstone sandwich? They have such a good idea about the tectonic plates and deep fault lines because the park's frequent earthquakes provide them with a lot of opportunities to study different phenomena. In July 2021, for example, more than 1,000 earthquakes rocked the area. These days, the team of researchers knows much more about some famous features, like the Old Faithful Geyser or the Grand Prismatic Spring. They've also found out that individual hydrothermal features on the surface can actually be connected to others, which can be as far as 6 miles away from them. Another interesting discovery is that even though Yellowstone geysers and hot springs vary in size, shape, color, volatility, and chemical composition, they are mostly fed by very similar underground sources. That means that the difference between the features appears closer to the surface. Now, I'm sure you've seen the iconic image of Yellowstone with a large rainbow-colored spring, fiery orange at its edges. So what makes these hot springs so colorful? Surprisingly, these awesome hues come from microscopic creatures. The temperatures in the springs are so high they can easily and quickly cook you. Plus, the water there is super acidic, like the liquid in a car battery. But there are certain types of heat-loving microbes that don't mind these crazy conditions. You can even say they're thriving there. So every ring of a different color is, in most cases, a ring inhabited by different bacteria. And each species is adapted to a particular temperature or pH level, which measures how acidic this or that environment is. For example, take the Grand Prismatic Spring, yes, the iconic one. Its rainbow hues likely hint at the diversity of microbes living there. So, starting from the center of the hot spring, you can see a beautiful aquamarine color there. That's where the water temperature is the highest, reaching 189 degrees Fahrenheit, because this area is right over the underground water source. The water there is too hot even for microbes. That's why what you see is mostly clear water. As for the reason for its blue color, it's the same as why the sky is blue. Sunlight hits the surface of the water and the light scatters, but the blue light scatters the most, getting reflected back to your eyes. Now, the next ring of color is yellow, all thanks to certain cyanobacteria. The temperature in this yellow ring reaches 165 degrees Fahrenheit. If the conditions in the hot spring were a bit different, these bacteria would create a blue-green hue thanks to a green pigment called chlorophyll. But since the sunlight hitting the spring is too intense, the bacteria start producing another type of pigment. It's called carotenoids. And guess what? It acts as a sunscreen for the bacteria. And since this pigment is orange, the normally green bacteria get a yellowish hue. And finally, we've got that bright orange color closer to the edges of the prismatic spring. It's a bit cooler there, around 149 degrees Fahrenheit. In this part of the spring, you can find several types of bacteria. They all produce substances that give the spring this bright orange color. And finally, right at the edges of the spring, the temperature is cooler, around 131 degrees, and a greater variety of microbes can survive there. All of them combined give the edges of the spring that red-brown hue. But scientists believe that people and their activity may have influenced the colors of Yellowstone's hydrothermal features. For example, in the past, the temperatures in the Morning Glory Pool used to be much higher than they are today. That's why its color was a deep blue. But trash has started to accumulate in the pool, and some of it clogged the vent. This caused the temperatures to drop, which led to microbial growth. As a result, that pretty blue color turned into orange-yellow. As for Yellowstone's geysers, the most famous one is called Old Faithful. It got this name at the end of the 19th century because of how regular its eruptions were. This geyser is more active than the others, erupting about 20 times a day. Each of these magnificent events lasts from 1 to 5 minutes, and the fountain of steaming water can reach a height of 180 feet. Now, while talking about Yellowstone National Park, we can't but mention Yellowstone supervolcano, right? Supervolcanoes appear when huge volumes of magma are trying to escape from deep underground. Eventually, they burst through Earth's surface. Sometimes all this magma gets stuck, unable to break through the planet's crust. And then, massive pools of pressurized magma gather at a depth of several miles. The pressure keeps growing because more and more magma is trying to get to the surface. At one point, a super eruption goes off. You don't necessarily want to be around for that. Over the past 50 years, the Yellowstone caldera has risen almost 3 feet. It shouldn't alarm you, though. Experts are sure it's a natural behavior for Yellowstone. Periods of dome-shaped uplift are followed by the caldera lowering. Scientists think the supervolcano doesn't present any danger at the moment. For an eruption to happen, the magma inside has to be at least 50% molten. With Yellowstone, this number is just 5 to 15%. Even better, a recent study made the researchers believe the hotspot might be in a state of decline right now, even despite all the breathing and dome-raising activity. There have been at least 3 other super eruptions in the history of Yellowstone volcano. They happened 2.1 million, 1.3 million, and 640,000 years ago, long before video. The most recent super eruption was dubbed the Lava Creek eruption. It formed the Yellowstone caldera after spilling out 240 cubic miles of rock, dust, and volcanic ash. No thanks, I'll pass. The Arctic is disappearing. In just a few years, the North Pole could see its first ice-free summer in the last 125,000 years. But a bold new experiment might turn back the clock. Scientists are refreezing the Arctic. If they succeed, they could save the North Pole. But if they fail, they could trigger unforeseen disasters. So, which way would things go? Well, here's some backstory. Deep in the Arctic, temperatures drop so low that metal cracks and winds scream across the ice. In winter, it's minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit on average. But despite the seemingly extreme cold, it's actually melting, warming 2 to 3 times faster than the rest of the planet. Now, ice is like Earth's natural mirror. It reflects sunlight back into space, keeping the planet cool. When it melts, it exposes the dark ocean underneath. The ocean absorbs sunlight instead of reflecting it, and it spreads all across the planet. This warms the planet even faster, melting even more ice. It's a vicious cycle, and if it continues, we'll reach a point where the ice won't come back. That thick, ancient ice that has covered the North Pole for thousands of years is already 95% gone. It's been disappearing since the 1980s. The ice that remains there now is thin and fragile, and when it disappears, it will trigger a dangerous chain reaction. Meanwhile, a group of researchers from a UK startup called Real Ice is out there trying to slow down or even reverse the melting of the Arctic. The project takes place in a tiny frozen village in Canada called Cambridge Bay. Real Ice wants to break the vicious cycle, and here's their plan. First, they drill through the existing ice and place an underwater pump beneath it. Then they pump seawater onto the ice surface, where it quickly freezes into an extra thick layer. Finally, they remove snow from the ice, which usually acts like a blanket, preventing further freezing. After that, ice keeps growing, stronger, thicker, and harder to melt. It's a simple idea inspired by nature itself. Ice naturally forms this way in some Arctic regions, but now scientists want to do it on a massive scale. So far, it appears to be working. Between January and May 2024, they covered around 44,000 square feet of ice, and it became 20 inches thicker on average. And in November 2024, they started a new round of tests. In the first 10 days of the trial, the ice was already 4 inches thicker. Now they'll return in May 2025 to check out how things are going. They think it's going to get between around 16 to 31 inches of it during the Arctic winter. It's a small start, admittedly, but if they can prove it works, their plan is to expand across an area more than twice the size of California, about 386,000 square miles of ice. And they're not stopping there. The big idea is to send in 500,000 underwater drones, powered by clean energy, to automate the entire process. These drones would drill holes, pump water, and refreeze the ice without human intervention. But not everyone is convinced. Some scientists think this whole idea is a disaster waiting to happen. First, they point out that saltier ice, the one from seawater pumped onto it, melts faster in the summer. So if this new ice melts too quickly, we could end up making the situation worse. Some of them also think this is a dangerous distraction from the core problem, like treating the symptoms instead of the root causes. Besides, making a small patch of ice thicker is one thing, but doing this across the entire Arctic? That's another challenge entirely. Another thing they're worried about is the ecosystem. The Arctic is one of the most fragile ecosystems on Earth. Changing ice thickness could affect marine life, disrupt algae growth, and impact the food chain in ways we don't fully understand. There's also the question of money. Real Ice estimates that refreezing the entire Arctic will cost about $5 to $6 billion per year. Who's paying for this? Right now, they're self-funded with some investors backing them. But eventually, they hope that countries, global funds, and even corporations will finance the project. Real Ice argues that doing nothing could be far worse. If we don't act, we could lose the Arctic within our lifetime. That could at least help to buy more time to fix the planet. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Now, the idea of saving the Arctic ice isn't new. Over the years, scientists have suggested some pretty wild plans to stop the melting. In 2017, there was the initial wind-powered pump plan. Physicist Stephen Desch proposed installing about 10 million wind-powered pumps in the Arctic. These pumps would pull seawater up onto the ice, kind of like real ice. It would freeze in the cold winter months, creating a thicker ice layer. The biggest problem is that someone would have to run this entire show. And what happens if something goes wrong? In 2018, there was the Glass Beads Plan, which was supposed to start in 2020s. A team called the Arctic Ice Project suggested covering the Arctic with tiny reflective glass beads. Yep, glass balls. The idea was basically to replace the ice's mirror effect. The beads would bounce sunlight away, keeping the ice colder for longer. The plan is being tested by a group of scientists working with the Arctic Ice Project. They say the glass balls are made of a material that's safe for animals. They even claim birds use similar materials to help them digest food. The glass used in these microspheres is the same material used in lab equipment and light bulbs. Sounds safe, right? Well, not so fast. There's also the environmental risk. These glass balls are tiny, and they could easily get into the ocean, impacting everything from fish to plankton. We still need more research to understand how this material breaks down in the ocean and whether it could affect marine life. But where things get really crazy is when we start talking about scaling this up. To cover just a tiny fraction of the Arctic, they would need millions of tons of these tiny microspheres, and that's just for starters. And they'd have to be working 24/7 through freezing temperatures and snowstorms. The scientists believe this could help keep the ice thick enough to survive summer and even slow the melting. But can it really work? Then there's also the Bright Ice Initiative, founded by the same folks behind the Arctic Ice Project. Instead of focusing on the Arctic Ocean, they want to use the same glass microspheres to restore glaciers. They've even tried this out on a glacier in Iceland, but experts are still skeptical. They say it could just speed up melting instead of reversing it. Now, another idea was cloud seeding with water particles. This would involve spraying ocean water into the sky itself. This would form clouds, and they'd reflect more sunlight. So, as you can see, some of these plans were too expensive, too complicated, or just straight up wild. The Real Ice's plan borrows ideas from earlier projects, but is much cheaper and more practical. Most importantly, it's working. But all this Arctic disaster is already affecting people. In the village of Newtok, Alaska, the land is disappearing. Each year, about 70 feet of the riverbank erodes, taking homes and history with it. That's all because of the erosion and the thawing permafrost. Now, these people had to move to a safer place called Murtavik, just 9 miles away. But it's a long and challenging journey. The relocation is taking years of planning, with Newtok residents already starting the shift in 2019. The new village offers better health and safety, but it's still a work in progress. Things like the school and grocery store remain in the old village, which makes things harder. Water and sewage systems are being set up, and for now, most residents are using a honey bucket system. But at least they have a chance to rebuild. It's still unclear whether these geoengineering ideas are a lifeline or a disaster. For now, we can just keep an eye on them.
You certainly know the Great Wall of China. But did you know the country just built a second one? This one, though, isn't made of bricks and stones, and it doesn't keep out invaders. Instead, it's made of plants and serves as a last line of defense against something that's been slowly but relentlessly taking over the country: sand. This big barrier surrounds the tricky Taklamakan Desert, located in the northwest part of the country. This area is huge, covering an area of over 130,000 square miles, just a bit smaller than Germany. It has some massive dunes, some towering over 300 feet, which is taller than a 30-story skyscraper. The temperatures are crazy too, with scorching heat in the summer, often going up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's not just the size or the temperature that makes it so fearsome. It's the way it moves. Yep, this is the world's second largest shifting sand desert. 85% of it is made up of dunes that move as they're carried by the wind. The sand is constantly swallowing roads, villages, and farmland in its path. The more adventurous travelers who cross the desert by car or bus can actually see the sand moving across the road. But they also notice something interesting on the horizon: green bushes. Don't mistake it for an oasis, though. That's the new Great Wall, or rather, the Green Wall. A massive project designed to fight desertification and control dust storms. But is this really such a big deal? Absolutely. China has been battling desert expansion for quite some time, as one of the reasons is that they need more space. You see, China is one of the most populous countries in the world, second only to India. And now you might be thinking, okay, but their territory is huge, so there's plenty of space for everyone. Well, technically, yes. After all, we are talking about a country that spans over 3 million square miles, almost as big as all of Europe. Even though China is huge, not all of its land can be used. A big part of the country is covered in arid terrain, places that aren't really suitable for construction and have very few people living there. There are 12 major deserts, which make up nearly 20% of China's territory. And this problem is only getting worse as the wasteland keeps expanding. In the future, deserts could take up as much as 44% of the country. Even the capital, Beijing, is at risk. By the way, the capital is already being constantly hit by severe sandstorms, forcing residents to stay inside to avoid the heavy air pollution. For years, China's deserts have been spreading at a rate of more than 1,300 square miles a year. Take the Ningxia-Hui region in northwestern China, for example. It's surrounded by 3 major deserts and has been battling desertification for over 60 years. And as of 2010, 57% of its land had already been affected. This isn't just an inconvenience. Desertification destroys farmland, crippling food production. It also forces people to abandon their homes after watching their village get buried in sand. Authorities are working hard to relocate these people to safer areas. And for those who choose to stay, life isn't easy. Farming, for example, is becoming more and more difficult. For example, farmers in the town of Tongunawa say that when they were kids, they could dig and find water tables about 6 feet deep. Now, they have to dig about 16 feet just to reach water. And since the soil isn't as soft or fertile as it used to be, they also have to use a lot more fertilizer on their crops. Okay, but why is all of this happening? There's not just one main reason for desertification. It's more like a combination of factors. In China specifically, studies show that about 20% of the blame is due to the planet's rising temperatures. I mean, yes, deserts are already environments that are prone to drought, but the increasing heat makes the dryness even worse. And it's a fact that it rains way less nowadays than it did a half a century ago. So, this climate disruption mainly affects the northeastern and northwestern parts of China. But in areas near the Muaz Desert in north-central China, there's another factor making the country even more arid. And that's us, humans. The equation is simple. More people, more desertification. Between 1997 and 2008, China's population grew by nearly 100 million people. With more people, they need more food, more space, and more resources. So they start cutting down trees, clearing land for farming, and using up all the natural resources around them. It's like the land is just getting stripped of everything it needs to stay healthy. That's how desertification speeds up. But the desertification problem in China can actually affect your life, even if you're on the other side of the world. Here's the thing. Soil stores a huge amount of carbon. But as the land degrades, not only does it lose the ability to hold on to that carbon, it can actually release it into the atmosphere. And when more carbon goes into the air, well, we all know how that story ends, right? Luckily, there are a few ways to keep China from turning into one giant sandpit. One solution that authorities have come up with is building the green wall we've been talking about in the Taklamakan Desert. By planting a massive amount of trees, shrubs, and other vegetation around the deserts, they're able to prevent sandstorms. The thing is, the wind and sand action at the edge of the desert is super intense, and the sand dunes keep expanding outward. This green belt also helps protect infrastructure. By locking in the desert's edges, it safeguards things like railways and roads. Building such a powerful barrier is a huge engineering feat. The first challenge is obviously the size of the desert that needs to be contained. It's massive. Then there's the height of the dunes, some of which reach crazy heights. The tallest dunes are as high as a skyscraper with 100 floors. On top of that, engineers have come up with solutions to make the greenbelt thrive in the dry climate, which makes reforestation practically impossible. So this is definitely not a project that happens overnight. Just in the Taklamakan Desert alone, it took 40 years to finish the first 1,700 miles of the greenbelt. To finish the rest, they needed a group of 600,000 people planting desert-tolerant species like desert poplar, red willow, and saxaul trees. Speaking of that, even the plants they're using in the project can create economic opportunities. For example, there is the desert hyacinth, also known as the ginseng of the desert. This plant actually thrives in dry environments, and it can be easily sold since it's traditionally used in food in China. Besides the plants, they're also setting up solar power bases around the desert. Installing solar panels there doesn't just generate power, it can also help keep the sand dunes from moving. This huge man-made barrier, which stretches about 2,000 miles around the Taklamakan Desert, was finally completed in November 2024. And it looks like all the hard work from the engineers really paid off. The portion of the country covered by deserts dropped from 27.2% in the previous decade to 26.8%. That's pretty amazing. But where did all that sand go? It's not like it just vanished into thin air. It's more like it's been contained now. The sand that used to move around is not spreading anymore, at least not taking over more land. The battle against desertification is far from over, but one thing is clear. China is no longer just fighting its deserts, it's actually winning. You're chilling in Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. A friend calls you up. Hey, I'm here too. Meet me in Maui. Great, but how do you get there? Your first thought is probably to take a ferry, but that's impossible. Hawaii is a pretty unique place. It's the most expensive state to live in. It has its own official language besides English. And it's the only American state made up entirely of islands. Hawaii has a total of 137 islands. 8 are the main ones, but only 6 are open to tourists. And the distance between those islands is probably bigger than you'd expect. For example, traveling from Oahu to the Big Island is around 185 miles, which is about the same distance as Chicago to Indianapolis. You might be surprised that you can't make that trip by boat. In fact, the only ferry system that actually takes passengers in Hawaii runs between Maui and Lanai. That's it. So your only option is to travel between islands is by plane. Honestly, it's a little surprising, especially considering how many people visit Hawaii every year. Tourism pretty much drives their economy, and in the first 8 months of 2024 alone, over 6 million people visited its beautiful beaches. Knowing that, we would expect Hawaii to set up a good ferry system to make it easier for visitors to get around. Just like in Greece. This would probably boost tourism even more, bringing more money to the state. But believe me, authorities and private companies also know that. In fact, they've already tried it. Ferries were a big way of getting around in Hawaii from the 19th century up until the 1950s. Since then, there have been a few attempts to bring back a ferry service, but unfortunately, they have all failed. One of the biggest attempts was the Hawaii Super Ferry, which aimed to provide a fast, affordable boat service between islands. It could carry almost 900 passengers and even allow them to bring their own cars along. The trial run started in 2007, and people were excited, but it turned into a big fiasco. A bunch of legal and environmental issues came up, like concerns about the impact on marine life, especially whales. The courts decided the ferry didn't go through the proper environmental reviews, and that caused a lot of trouble. By 2009, after tons of protests and setbacks, they had to shut it down. If a project like this comes up again, it will probably fail one more time. And there are a few reasons why it's almost impossible to set up a regular ferry system there. Let's start by talking about Hawaii's rough waters. They are deep and wild. Take the Alenoiaha Channel, for example. It's a 30-mile stretch that separates Maui from the Big Island. Its name means Great Billow Smashing Channel, and it lives up to that. It's over 6,000 feet deep, making it one of the most dangerous stretches of water on Earth. The wind there is also super strong, the fastest in Hawaii's coastal waters. But it's not any easier in the rest of the archipelago. The whole region gets hit by storms from the Pacific up north, sending big waves crashing into the islands and making the waters rough and unpredictable. Swells can come from 3, 4, or even more directions, making the sea feel really choppy. Someone who's not used to taking ferry boats would definitely find that, well, uncomfortable, to say the least. To deal with rough seas like this, the ferries have to be really big and strong. But that also makes them more expensive and harder to run than the ones in places like Alaska or Washington State. Another reason it's so tough to set up this system today has to do with marine life. A big ship moving through the shallower waters when docking could really damage the local ecosystem. And there's also the problem that the sea routes are also the migration paths of many sea animals, like humpback whales and spinner dolphins. Not to mention, ferry services can make it easier to spread harmful plants and animals, what experts call invasive species. See, Hawaii's ecosystem is super unique because it's been isolated out in the middle of the Pacific. When we talk about plants and animals that are native to Hawaii, we mean they got there on their own, no humans involved. They arrived with the help of waves, wind, or even birds flying over. But events like these are super rare. So for over 70 million years, their plants and animals didn't have to deal with outside competition. That's made them really fragile. So, when new species get brought in by us, it can be a big problem, and they could end up harming the environment. Hawaii's already been battling invasive species like fire ants, coqui frogs, and meconium, a fast-growing plant from South America that takes over native forests. People there worry that ferries, which carry cars and cargo between islands, could accidentally spread these invaders even more. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the video, the long distances between their lands don't really help either. For example, if you were to travel from Oahu to the Big Island of Hawaii by boat, it would take around 30 hours, and that's without any stops. The same trip by plane takes about 50 minutes. Ferries that cover long distances are much more expensive, so they need a much bigger demand to make them profitable. On top of that, the state doesn't really have the infrastructure, like enough ports and terminals to support the operations. so setting up new routes is pretty much out of the question. Airplanes, on the other hand, are a different story. The air travel industry in Hawaii is already well established and super competitive. That means flying is still the most practical option in Hawaii. Planes are quick, they don't make you seasick, and are pretty affordable, usually costing around $100 for a round trip. Okay, but what do the locals think about all this? Well, apparently, there isn't a huge demand for residents to commute between the islands all that often. Oahu is the busiest island in Hawaii, with about 70% of the state's population living there. It is where Honolulu, the capital, is located, and where most of the state's business happens. So, people from the other islands usually come over for a specific doctor's appointment or to catch a big concert. And that might happen once or twice a year, no more than that. So, even if people could choose between taking a ferry and a plane for these special occasions, most of them would probably still prefer flying. There are plenty of options between the main island airports. Planes usually start flying around 5 in the morning, and there are flights available every hour until the last one, which is usually at 9 in the evening. If you've been dreaming of going to this paradisiacal place but are worried about spending too much on plane tickets, I have some tips for you. First off, keep in mind that visiting all the main islands in 5 days or less is way too ambitious. So, if you don't have much time to spend there, think about your priorities. Each of the 6 islands open to tourists has its own vibe and activities. But you don't need to visit them all in one trip, and you can save some money by sticking to fewer islands. You can still explore the diversity of the islands by picking 2 that offer a nice contrast to each other. For example, while Oahu has that bustling city energy, Kauai has a much more relaxed vibe. Also, flights in the morning are usually cheaper, and it might be better to fly on a weekday rather than the weekend, although the price difference isn't usually huge. Hopefully these tips will save you some cash while still having an unforgettable island hopping adventure in Hawaii. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who's also dreaming of exploring these amazing islands.
This catapult-like system on the moon might bring us limitless energy. It's a launch system concept that was recently proposed by the Chinese scientists. It would work like a hammer throw, spinning a launch arm that flings objects. This arm is supposed to be about 165 feet long. It will accelerate until it reaches the moon's escape velocity, and then whoosh, the capsule is sent into space. This crazy idea will cost around $18 billion. Ooh, pricey. But trust me, it's totally going to be worth it. The system would be powered by solar panels and nuclear energy. It could also recover more than 70% of the energy used after each launch. The moon has a very weak gravity. There's also barely any atmosphere, so the air doesn't weigh you down. This makes it so much easier to launch stuff there. But why do we even need this? The main purpose is to transport helium-3. It's a really cool isotope of helium, and one of the most insane things about it is that it could become fuel for nuclear fission. This is the same process that happens in stars, including our Sun. If we manage to recreate nuclear fusion here, on Earth, we can make it a clean and basically limitless source of energy for power plants. But helium-3 is super rare on Earth. We can sometimes find it in volcanic rock formations on the ocean floor. That's because it's a product of another rare element called tritium, the element we usually make in nuclear reactors and put in cool stuff like glow-in-the-dark paint. But the catch of tritium is that it takes forever to decay and turn into helium-3. Now, there's a bunch of helium-3 on the moon, around 1 million tons. Just 20 tons of helium-3 could meet China's yearly electricity needs. In fact, lunar soil has enough helium-3 to power the entire world for over 1,000 years. But why is there so much of helium-3 on the moon and barely none on our planet? Well, that's because helium-3 comes from the sun and travels in solar winds. Solar winds are like streams of dangerous particles. They're super radioactive. Our planet's thick atmosphere and magnetic field serve as a shield for us. They almost fully protect us from those particles. But, unfortunately, they also prevent the good stuff like helium-3 from getting here. The Moon's atmospheric shields are super thin though, so it's under a constant shower of solar winds. So, helium-3 accumulated there over billions of years, and now it's just scattered around there. But mining it and bringing back to Earth is no easy feat. It's super expensive. Just think about it. Rockets need tons of fuel to break free from gravity. Every single bolt and screw on the spacecraft must be engineered to survive extreme conditions, like radiation. Not to mention, you need a team of rocket scientists, literally working around the clock to make sure nothing goes wrong. You can't call a repair guy if something breaks on the Moon. So generally, it costs about $500,000 to send 1 pound of payload to our satellite. That's based on estimates from NASA. To get some idea, let's calculate how much it would cost to send an apple to the Moon. A typical apple weighs about 0.4 pounds, so that funny mission would be at least $200,000. Now, for comparison, the Chinese launch system weighs around 80 tons. Another problem is that the lunar surface is pretty harsh on the equipment, like the freakish lunar dust, for example. You might recall this small thing that happened in the 60s called the moon landings. But when the Apollo astronauts came back from the Moon, they found something weird was happening to them. Their throats were sore and their eyes watered. Luckily, it wasn't some scary moon sickness. Turns out, there's a lot of lunar dust clinging to their spacesuits. This dust seems harmless, but it's made up of sharp and abrasive particles, much smaller than a human hair, yet sharp like glass. It contains silicate, a thing that can cause severe lung problems on Earth and is a common issue for miners. So it caused a lunar hay fever. At least that's how NASA astronaut Harrison Schmitt called it. All 12 astronauts who walked on the Moon were then sneezing and experiencing nasal congestion. Sometimes it took days to fade away. The dust even got inside their spacecraft, smelling like burnt gunpowder. This nasty stuff can be harmful to both humans and equipment. It managed to damage spacesuit boots and even ruin the seals on the containers used to bring back samples during the Apollo missions. As we mentioned, they're glass-sharp and jagged, so they start scratching, grinding, and wearing down any surfaces they come in contact with. They don't care if it's metal, glass, or humans. And since there's so much dust, this causes equipment to malfunction and fail quite quickly. And that's just one of the possible hurdles with lunar missions. So scientists really need to come up with some weird ideas to get that precious helium-3. The Chinese scientist project looks like a weird sci-fi invention, but it's a cost-effective way to transport materials back to us. It could throw stuff to Earth twice a day, and it would be 90% cheaper than current methods. Since it only needs electricity and no fuel, the system would be small and easy to set up. Besides the beloved helium-3, this catapult would also help advance technologies in space mining and heavy launch vehicles. No lunar dust scares this thing. It should last for at least 20 years. It would need to be transported to the Moon using China's super heavy lift rocket. But the idea is far from new. There was a novel called The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein. In the story, there's a lunar colony that uses an electromagnetic catapult to send weed and water ice back to Earth. It gets quite wild when the colonists, known as loonies, eventually take control of this catapult. They threaten to launch rocks at Earth unless their colony is recognized as an independent world. Sounds kind of funny, but a large rock, if thrown at us from the Moon, could wipe out a city. The damage would be like from a meteorite strike, with fires, houses destroyed, and worse. But scientists have been talking about this catapult idea for a while. For decades, they were trying to find a way to use electromagnetic systems to send resources from the Moon to Earth. There are also some challenges. For example, scientists forgot to mention how exactly helium-3 would be extracted from the lunar soil. Installing this launch system on the Moon's rugged surface would be difficult as well. Also, they would need to make sure that the system remains stable at high speeds and that it could withstand the Moon's extreme temperature changes, cosmic rays, and intense solar radiation. So, it would take some time to develop. China hopes to have the key components of the system ready by 2030. The full-scale operations might start by 2045. China has tons of plans for the moon. For example, they want to build a research station at its south pole by 2035. But China's not the only one in this space race. Considering that NASA plans to send humans on Mars by that time, oh boy, the 2030s will be a crazy decade for space exploration. There's also an American startup that's part of the lunar economy. The ones that plan to land astronauts on the moon have people actually living on our satellite in a decade or two. One of the goals of this colony is to boost economic growth and create new jobs. Most of them will likely involve some mining activities. And if there'd be 2 space colonies, well, they'll have to figure something out.
Do you know that our planet has scars? One of them is located in North America. This scar can tell us many cool things about the history of Earth, but the most interesting thing is that it could change the appearance of our continents and break our world. But for some reason, this scar hasn't done it yet. And that's not even the most interesting part. The coolest thing about this scar is that it might hold a giant source of clean, cheap energy. So let's go to Kansas to find out what it is. So, 1.1 billion years ago, a giant rift formed in the crust of our planet on the territory of the modern U.S. Midwest. It's called Broken Heart. This giant crevice is filled with solidified magma, and from afar, it looks like a real scar. But how did it show up? Broken Heart was an ancient rift valley, a huge geological fault forming elongated hollows in the Earth's crust. It occurred because tectonic plates had moved apart. It's like the details of a jigsaw puzzle that suddenly started to separate. At that moment, thousands and even millions of tons of magma spilled out from the depths of our planet. That event looked like a real apocalypse, lasting about 100,000 years. But then it stopped, and scientists don't know why. If the rifting process had lasted longer, then most likely, the continent of North America would look different today, or it wouldn't even exist at all. Right now, this fault looks like a giant horseshoe that stretches from Kansas north to Lake Superior and south to Michigan. But some studies indicate that the fault may be larger and extend even further south, and the width of the fault might equal the width of the Red Sea. After the rifting stopped, the entire valley got covered with hills and trees. The fault itself is covered with a thick layer of sedimentary rocks, so it's quite difficult to track. The most noticeable parts of the rift are in the Lake Superior area. Now everything looks calm and beautiful, but in the past, there were fountains and rivers of lava, earthquakes, a boiling pot on a planetary scale. All that remains of it are deposits of basalt, a dark, dense rock that forms from cooled lava. There was so much basalt that its weight pushed the valley deeper and deeper into the Earth's crust. Even when the eruptions and rifting stopped, the valley continued to sink because of the huge mass of this sediment. Then, massive sections of the Earth's crust on both sides of the valley began to contract, and the pieces of the puzzle slowly started to come together. This led to a large-scale ejection of volcanic material upward, and along with basalt, deposits of copper rock appeared in the valley. People mined this copper for about 8,000 years until the end of the 20th century. The copper mines were eventually shut down, but now it seems the industry is making a comeback. However, Broken Heart is not interesting to people just because of its copper reserves. It holds something more valuable and useful for our civilization. Scientists believe that this valley hides massive reserves of hydrogen, and this substance can help us switch to a cleaner, cheaper, and more efficient energy source. If hydrogen fuel becomes widely available, everyone will switch to it, leaving behind the costly, noisy, and polluting process of oil production. Now, I'll bet hydrogen is a remarkably familiar word to you. It doesn't sound like the discovery of the century, and people have been using it for a long time. On one hand, you're right, but not quite. 90% of the hydrogen produced by humans is used as a raw material for the chemical industry. Hydrogen is used to produce ammonia for fertilizers, methanol for fuel and solvents, and to purify crude oil. Manufacturers of glass, cement, steel, and other metals are considering using hydrogen at their factories for more efficient production. Hydrogen can become an alternative to fossil fuels, that is, oil and gasoline produced from them. Cars, ships, trains, airplanes, and power plants, all of these may switch to hydrogen soon. In this case, production can become cheaper and better for nature. But this will work only if we find open sources of hydrogen. You see, about 95% of the hydrogen we use is produced from fossil fuels. We gasify coal, oxidize hydrocarbons, and extract hydrogen from methane. All of these production methods require energy. But the worst part is that they lead to large emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But what if we find sources of pure hydrogen that don't require processing? Then we'll save energy for its production and make the planet cleaner. But where can we find such sources? Scientists say that there are many of them all over the planet, and one of the largest is located in the Rift Valley in the U.S. Midwest. But what's the problem with going and mining it? Well, it's not that simple. To extract pure hydrogen, you need 3 conditions. The first is the source of hydrogen itself, which is quite logical. The second is reservoir rocks, that is, natural containers where this hydrogen is stored. And the third is natural seals, which prevent the gas from escaping. In other words, these seals work like a cap on a bottle. They don't allow the substance to escape. So in general, it's necessary to find where hydrogen is released, where it accumulates, and where it's stored. When these conditions are met, natural resource extraction companies can start working. But how does hydrogen appear altogether? Well, let's go over the basics of chemistry. Hydrogen and oxygen compounds form water. This means you need to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. This process often occurs in nature. There are many places all over the planet where this happens. Scientists are confident that at least 30 U.S. states have hydrogen reservoirs. And if people detect them, we will accelerate the energy transition to safer and more efficient fuels. Thousands of cars drive around using gasoline. Many of you know the smell of exhaust fumes, that thick polluted air that's hard to breathe. What about electric cars? They must be improving the situation, right? Well, here's another problem. Producing batteries for these vehicles harms nature. The materials used to make batteries are lithium, cobalt, and nickel. Their extraction involves a large release of toxic materials, not only into the air but also into the water. Transporting these batteries also creates a large carbon footprint. Producing a single electric car emits about 4 tons of carbon dioxide. To make up for that, the owner needs to drive it for at least 8 years. That's how long it takes to offset the emissions a regular car would produce. What about reliability and convenience? What will you do if the battery runs out during the trip and there are no charging stations nearby? This problem will be solved in the future with the growing popularity of electric cars. Now, scientists believe that over the past billion years, the Earth's crust has split enough water into hydrogen and oxygen. Our planet keeps this gas in the ground, waiting for us to start using it. According to calculations, even considering all the technologies and production capacities of our civilization, the reserves of hydrogen in the bowels of the planet are enough to supply us with energy for 170,000 years. That's why the giant rift in Kansas attracts scientists from all over the world. Huge quantities of basalt and other rocks can react with water to release hydrogen. And now scientists are looking for places where this material accumulates and is stored. Beneath the frozen ground of the northernmost region of Finland lies a discovery with the potential to change the world's future. From nuclear energy to electric cars. These minerals make it feel like a sci-fi future is just around the corner. But, as always, it's not that simple. Let's explore why. All the way up here on the map is a region called Lapland, a land with only 1 chair for every 2 people, so someone has to sit on someone else's lap. It's a remote snow-covered corner of Finland, where reindeer outnumber people who live there. Here, the night sky glows with the northern lights almost 200 times in a single year. Oh, and Santa Claus has a house there. In 1985, Finland declared that Santa lives in Rovaniemi, a town just south of the Arctic Circle in Lapland. They even built Santa Claus Village, where visitors can meet with them. You can cross the Arctic Circle line and see his main post office, which receives hundreds of thousands of letters from kids worldwide every year. So, it's sufficient to say that most people know about this place because of Santa's workshop, rather than scientific news. But deep below the ice in pine forests is the Sahara deposit. It's a massive mineral geological site that's been studied for decades. It's mostly known for iron and phosphate. We use iron to make, well, almost everything, while phosphate mostly ends up as fertilizer to grow our food. However, recently, surveys revealed rare earth elements, niobium, and traces of radioactive metals like thorium and uranium. The possibility of thorium is what made news outlets excited. Thorium is a naturally occurring, slightly radioactive metal. It's way more common in the Earth's crust than uranium. In fact, it's about 3 to 4 times as abundant. Scientists love it because thorium could be turned into nuclear fuel with huge numbers as the output gain. A chunk of thorium the size of a golf ball could, in theory, generate as much energy as several tons of coal. It also comes with some major perks. Thorium reactors would produce less waste, meaning that thorium is much easier to contain and safer to use. And it even has an interesting trivia. Thorium was once used in old-fashioned gas lantern mantles because it glows when heated. And that's not all. The Sahara deposit also has other rare minerals that are critical for making magnets that go into wind turbines, electric cars, and even your smartphone. With the right investment, this single deposit could help Europe build thousands of new wind turbines or power millions of electric car batteries. So, did Finland and the entire planet just hit the geological lottery? Well, yes and no. Today, nuclear plants don't run on thorium, they run on uranium, the trusty fuel that has been powering reactors for decades. The whole system, from mining to reactor design to handling the waste, is built around uranium. It already provides around 10% of the world's electricity. In fact, in some countries, like France, it's the main source. It works, it powers millions of homes, and the industry knows exactly how to handle it. Thorium does not play by the same rules. It's not fissile, which means it cannot split and release energy on its own. Which is a fancy way of saying it needs a little help to become useful. You cannot just toss it into a regular reactor and expect magic to happen. That would be like trying to charge a Tesla by pouring gasoline into the tank. To make thorium work, you'd need different types of reactors and the system that could support them. One that's expensive, experimental, and not yet ready for prime time. So yes, Sahara's thorium looks impressive. It's full of sparkle and promise. But for now, it is staying underground, waiting for future technologies and investments. But what about those other rare earth elements? Neodymium and praseodymium might be tricky to pronounce, yes they are. But they're hiding inside almost everything these days, from earbuds to the massive MRI machines in hospitals. They drive the motors in electric cars and help giant wind turbines spin. In short, they're everywhere. And then there's niobium. This metal makes steel even stronger. Add a little niobium and suddenly you've got stronger, lighter alloys used in bridges and even rockets. Today, Europe imports nearly all of it, mainly from Brazil. If Sahara were developed, Finland could give Europe a homegrown supply. However, again, it's complicated. Like I mentioned, Lapland happens to be one of the most beautiful places on the entire planet. It's one of Europe's last great wildernesses, where pine forests stretch for miles. And digging up all those materials wouldn't be without consequences. Mining at this scale could ruin the landscape, upset Santa, or endanger delicate Arctic ecosystems. After all, we're talking about radioactive elements. It's not just about nature, though. Indigenous Sami communities live in Lapland, so they have a voice in what happens. It's a tricky situation that relies on more research and tech advancements. Until then, what are some other delicate places that could hide thorium? Well, thorium is not that hard to find. It's tucked away in beach sands and mountain deposits. But the coolest place to get it would be from the moon. Back in the 1990s, NASA's Lunar Prospector spacecraft mapped the lunar surface and spotted areas unusually rich in thorium. Now, that's an incentive for speeding up the future moon missions, especially since our satellite probably hides elements like helium-3, which are incredibly rare on our planet. Mining the moon might be a perfect solution. Big companies will certainly have way less competition. But hey, that sounds like a decent challenge for humanity, given that the moon has no atmosphere, which makes it exposed to radiation and wild temperature changes. So, we will see. Meanwhile, let's go back to Earth for another seemingly unrelated discovery. Going down to the deep ocean seabeds, scientists recently found something pretty surprising. While exploring the Pacific abyssal plains, they discovered polymetallic nodules. These are potato-sized lumps of metal that are also important for making batteries. But the cool part is that the nodules seem to be releasing oxygen into the water. Scientists call it the dark oxygen. Ooh. Normally, oxygen comes from photosynthesis, which needs sunlight to reach plants, algae, or bacteria. But down here, in total darkness, there is no sunlight. The idea is that these rocks act like tiny batteries. Their surfaces can create very small electric currents and split water into hydrogen and oxygen. Basically, these rocks might be quietly breathing oxygen all on their own. If this is true, it could change how we understand deep-sea life. Some creatures might not just rely on hydrothermal vents or food falling from above. They could be getting a secret oxygen boost from the rocks themselves. Now, research is still new, and some researchers say this oxygen could be contaminated or just too little in volume to matter. But if it's real, it means life in the abyss might have a secret oxygen supply we never even knew existed. Creepy, mysterious, and kind of amazing all at once. It also makes us wonder about life on other planets. If rocks on Earth can make oxygen in total darkness, maybe extraterrestrial oceans on moons like Europa or Enceladus can too. The universe might be full of secret oxygen factories just waiting to surprise us. Finally, aside from thorium, Finland recently made headlines with another cool geological discovery. Scientists found some zircon crystals that washed into rivers, and when they looked closer, they noticed that the chemical signatures didn't match local rocks. Instead, they traced back to Greenland. This suggests that part of Scandinavia's ancient base might actually have come from there. In simpler terms, it's possible that Scandinavia broke off from Greenland and drifted across the ocean billions of years ago. This unexpected link makes the Nordic landscape a lot older and more interesting than we previously thought. Whether the Sokley deposit could power the future with infinite energy remains to be seen. Each day seems to bring another discovery that inspires conversation and prompts us to learn something new. Who knows what new technologies or hidden resources the next decade will uncover? Now, excuse me, since I've learned his address, I have to write a letter to Santa. I'm still trying to get off of his naughty list.
Some places don't look important until the world realizes they hold the keys to the future. That's the case with Canada's Arctic. For most of history, it was just ice, snow, rocks, caribou, and, even more ice. But now, it's about to become one of the most important places on Earth, and maybe make Canada a global superpower. Why? Because it's hiding minerals that power electric vehicles, satellites, and missile systems, while the demand is skyrocketing. However, it's not just mining and having resources, it's also about control. Right now, China has a massive head start because it refines over 90% of the world's rare earths. That means if you want to launch a satellite, manufacture advanced electronics, or even just keep the lights on in your fancy smart home, odds are you're relying on China. And that makes a lot of world powers very nervous. Because when everything's going electric, the last thing you need is being dependent on your geopolitical rival. So now, the global clean tech treasure hunt is officially on. The US, Europe, Japan, Australia, they're all competing. However, the latest technology and untapped potential might give Canada the upper hand. Canada's had these minerals for decades. But with low prices, tough terrain, and no global rush, they mostly stayed untouched. However, Ottawa is finally stepping up its game. Back in 2022, Canada rolled out the Critical Minerals Strategy with billions in funding and tax perks to get companies digging. There's also plans to build the necessary roads, ports, and power lines to tap into those remote deposits up north. Canada already produces more than 60 minerals and metals, but 31 of them are now considered critical. 6 of those are having VIP treatment: lithium, graphite, nickel, cobalt, copper, and rare earth elements. But digging it up is just step 1. The real plan? Keep it local. Melt that frozen treasure into shiny new batteries right at home. That means not just mines, but also refineries, processing centers, and high-tech factories popping up where there used to be nothing but snowdrifts and silence. While others are talking, Canada's busy paving roads and stringing power lines. Slowly but surely, they're turning snowfields into a high-tech playground. Getting to all that buried treasure used to be nearly impossible. After all, we're talking about land so remote that roads literally stop hundreds of miles too early. The ground is frozen solid for most of the year. And even if you found something valuable, just getting out was a logistical nightmare. So what changed? Canada has an ace up its sleeve. Don't know about you, but I use it mainly for making memes and music. But geologists? They're scanning the Arctic like it's Minecraft with X-ray vision. Instead of drilling blind, they're using decades-old core samples, plugging them into AI, and getting shockingly accurate predictions about what's underground. It's like upgrading from a pirate's treasure map to a GPS that actually says, "Dig here." Companies like Geologic AI and Cobalt Metals are already doing this, pouring data into AI and getting X marks the spot hits for nickel, cobalt, and rare earths. In the Northwest Territories, Canada is running a pilot lab that uses AI and digital scanning to reanalyze decades-old rock samples. The goal is to spot hidden mineral deposits that old methods might have missed without digging a single new hole. All that sounds great, but maybe I made it sound simpler than it is. Digging up the Arctic is a logistical nightmare. For starters, this isn't just a remote patch of land. The Canadian Arctic is huge. Almost half the country, stretching over Yukon, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. We're talking about a region larger than India, with fewer people than a small city. Most of it is permafrost, wilderness, or ice-covered islands scattered across the Arctic archipelago. Temperatures go from barely 50 degrees Fahrenheit during summer to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit or colder, with ground that stays frozen for most of the year. Fun fact, did you know that negative 40 degrees happens to be the same as negative 40 degrees Celsius? It's the one temperature where both scales intersect. They climb at different rates, but eventually cross paths when it gets cold enough. Just a small trivia nugget for weather nerds like me. Anyways, you can't just roll in a truck and break ground in the Arctic. Up there, roads just stop. Want to build something? It can take years, and one nasty winter can put everything on ice. And if you want to continue up north, you need more of everything. More food, more fuel, more machines, which means even more money. Speaking of money, another chilling fact is how much this all costs. Mining in the far north is way more expensive than doing it in, say, Australia or Chile. An AI might tell you where the minerals are, but people and big machines still have to dig, and that costs a fortune. But that's not all. Most of the Canadian North is Indigenous land. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities have lived there for thousands of years, and mineral hotspots often sit right on their ancestral grounds. So when Canada talks about unlocking the Arctic, it's not just a question of roads and robots. It's a question of partnership and collaboration. And that's not optional. Legally, projects on Indigenous land require consultation and, in many cases, consent. The good news, some communities aren't just involved, they're leading the way. In regions like Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, Indigenous-owned corporations and world powers are already shaping how development happens on their terms. If Canada wants to pull this off, it's going to need more than tech and funding. It's going to need trust. So with all that in mind, can Canada pull this off? Honestly? With technological advancements and partnerships, it doesn't seem impossible. But Canada isn't just doing one thing right. It's doing a bunch of things at the same time. Let's recap. Hidden resources? Checked. New strategy? In place. Big funding? Approved. AI tools? Deployed. Indigenous partnerships? Underway. Infrastructure? Already breaking ground. It's a snowball turning into an avalanche. Exploration boosts investment. Investment speeds up roads. Roads unlock more deposits. More deposits attract more factories. It's a feedback loop, and if they keep feeding it, the whole Arctic operation could go from an idea to empire faster than anyone expects, giving a whole new meaning to the phrase frozen assets. But this doesn't just help Canada. It could save the US a whole lot of trouble. If all goes to plan, the US won't need to ship rare earths halfway across the planet. It can just look north, wave at the caribou, and get what it needs from its closest neighbor. That's why the US has publicly backed the effort, offering support and funding to help build a trusted North American supply chain. For Canada, this could be the moment it stops being just a supplier of raw materials and starts becoming a critical power broker in the clean tech economy. For the US, it's like discovering your neighbor has been secretly building a battery factory in their backyard while you were building electric vehicles. And globally? Well, the abundance of resources tends to lower the prices, and that's always a good thing for us regular people. Cheaper cobalt, nickel, and lithium mean cheaper batteries, and cheaper batteries mean more affordable electric vehicles, energy storage, phones, laptops, the works. Now, don't get too excited just yet. Like we said, mining in the Arctic isn't cheap, but in theory, once Canada's clean tech engine is fully up and humming, more supply and shorter supply chains should gradually bring costs down. And it's not just about price tags, it's about stability. Right now, if one country cuts exports or gets caught in politics, everything down the line gets shaky. But with Canada stepping in as a reliable supplier, the global system might get a bit more breathing room. Manufacturers can stop sweating over single points of failure and start building with confidence.
Now, if you could get into a time machine and travel back to 1969, you'd see something spectacular. What you're looking at isn't some random desert. It's one of the most powerful waterfalls, completely dry. In the summer and fall of 1969, the American side of Niagara Falls stayed without water. It lasted 6 months. Researchers wanted to study the rock face of the falls. They were afraid it was going to become too unstable because of erosion. Erosion is the process when natural forces, such as water and wind, wear away earthen materials. For example, if you see glacial ice become muddy, it means erosion is happening. 3 waterfalls that cross the international border between Canada and the United States together make something we know as the magnificent Niagara Falls. The 3 waterfalls are the Horseshoe Falls, the American Falls, and the Bridal Veil Falls, in order from largest to smallest. The American Falls are fully on the American side, while the Horseshoe Falls are primarily on the Canadian side, divided by Goat Island. The Bridal Veil Falls, the smallest of them all, are on the American side, but separated from the others by Luna Island. Don't America and Canada have a cool natural border? Many didn't believe we could actually go against wild nature and stop such insane amounts of water from flowing. But we did it. It took a 600-foot dam across the enormous Niagara River to really shut down these astonishing falls. This means they had to divert 60,000 gallons of water every second so that the remaining flow traveled over the biggest Horseshoe Falls. Yup, the ones that are completely on the Canadian side of the border. Over 27,000 tons of rock were used to construct that dam, and more than 1,000 trucks carried that rock back in the hot summer of '69. On June 12th, the American Falls stopped, after their continuous flow for more than 12,000 years. So the Horseshoe Falls then took the extra flow and absorbed it so that research could be done. But the locals were still worried. They knew it wasn't possible to control such amounts of water. They were afraid the water might take a different route and cause a catastrophic flood. They were worried that tourists wouldn't come anymore if teams didn't manage to make the waterfall flow again the way it used to. But tourists kept coming even that summer, and they got a unique chance to see something no one had ever seen before or after. During that period, there was even a temporary walkway built only 20 feet away from the edge of the now dry falls. It helped workers to clean the bottom of what used to be a river, so tourists could go there and explore the wild landscape of the falls that was usually under the water, hostile, and not accessible to visitors at all. As they were exploring the dried bottom of the falls, researchers stumbled upon millions of different coins people had thrown in the water over decades, maybe to make a wish or for some other purpose. Wow, a Niagara Falls piggy bank! Well, they removed most of those coins. I wonder who got them. But in the past couple of decades, more and more tourists have been coming here. Imagine all the things they could find now. More coins, of course, but also lost cameras, errant drones, cell phones, and other things careless visitors could accidentally drop in the waterfalls. The idea of removing all the water and turning Niagara Falls into a desert proved to be possible, but it may need to be done again. In 2020, the media reported that 2 pedestrian bridges in Niagara Falls needed to be either replaced or repaired. No wonder, since they're almost 120 years old. These bridges are located above the rapids. Experts discuss whether they should divert the water once again or not. People talk about Niagara Falls a lot, and some believe they're among the tallest waterfalls in the world. But the truth is, they're not. They're famous, precious, and breathtaking. But when it comes to height, there are nearly 500 other waterfalls across the globe that are taller than Niagara. Let's take Angel Falls in Venezuela, for example. They're more than 3,000 feet tall. But what makes Niagara Falls so special, among other waterfalls, is the amount of water that flows over them. Very high waterfalls don't usually have great amounts of water. The combination of all those huge amounts of water and the height is what makes Niagara Falls so breathtaking. Also, they might be some of the fastest-moving waterfalls on our planet. The Niagara River appeared after the last ice age, together with the whole Great Lakes basin. The Niagara River is part of it. 18,000 years ago, I wasn't around then, this awesome waterfall didn't exist. Ice sheets covered the area of southern Ontario. They were 1 to 2 miles thick. As the ice sheets were moving southward, they created the basin of the Great Lakes. Then they melted, releasing enormous amounts of water into the basins. Generally, the water we drink is fossil water. Only 1% of it renews through the year, with the remaining 99% coming from ice sheets. The Niagara Peninsula hasn't been beneath the ice for nearly 12,500 years. As the ice melted, the resulting water started to flow down through what later turned into Niagara River, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. It took a lot of time, but the water eventually eroded cliffs and formed these spectacular falls. Now, you might have noticed that the Niagara River is amazingly green. This specific color tells us how powerful the water is when it comes to erosion. Every minute, Niagara Falls spews over 60 tons of dissolved minerals. All that, together with dissolved salt and finely ground rock, makes the color so magnificent. People who live in the United States and Canada, or more precisely, over 1 million people who have access to the area, use the waters of Niagara River for different purposes. For example, fishing, getting drinking water, doing recreational activities, including swimming, boating, and birdwatching, producing hydroelectric power, and so much more. Now, the first hydroelectric generating station in the world was built at the end of the 19th century, and it was right next to the falls. Pretty soon it started paying off because people were getting electricity from it. But this electricity could travel only 300 feet, so something needed to be improved there. Nikola Tesla was the one who took up the challenge and made the necessary changes. He discovered that electricity could travel long distances if an alternating current was used. Today, several Niagara Falls power plants provide over 2 million kilowatts of power. Okay, I'll tell you another interesting thing. 1969 wasn't the only time when Niagara Falls stopped. Back in 1848, the water didn't flow over the falls for up to 40 hours. Now, the falls were already very popular among tourists and a useful source of energy for local people, so no wonder they freaked out. Nature was to blame this time. Ice blocked the source of the Niagara River. An American farmer was the first one to notice it. It was March 29th, and he went for a walk right before midnight. Soon, he realized he couldn't hear the powerful roar of the falls. He quickly went to the edge of the river and stood there in shock. There was hardly any water. Factories and mills had to shut down because they depended on that water. Turtles were just wandering around. Fish didn't survive. Some people took a walk on the river bottom, taking little things they could find there as souvenirs. But 2 days later, on March 31st, people heard a distant rumbling coming from upriver. It was getting nearer and louder until a wall of water appeared in front of their eyes. And one of the world's greatest attractions that millions of tourists visit every year was back in business again. Magnificent and, in the end, invincible. As it should be.
Well, this eerie Lake Huron discovery may be that it possibly contains the remnants of an entire civilization. Whoa, wait, sounds like Atlantis, right? Well, not exactly. But if there really had been an ancient underwater civilization here, it must have been a pretty advanced one. Around 10,000 years ago, two sharp glassy flakes broke off a stone tool and landed on the ground unnoticed. They stayed buried there for thousands of years, until 2013. Then scientists pulled up a small chunk of mud, about the size of a milk carton, from the bottom of Lake Huron, 100 feet underwater. Inside the mud, they found those same two flakes made of obsidian, a shiny black volcanic glass that forms when lava cools quickly. After careful testing, they realized these flakes came from Central Oregon, which is quite a distance, about 2,500 miles away. They found this prehistoric Great Lakes site on the Alpena Amberley Ridge, an underwater landform that once connected what's now Michigan and Ontario. Back then, it was dry land. Early humans used it to build traps for animals like caribou as the Ice Age faded and the Great Lakes began to form. Now, obsidian was the high-tech material of ancient times. It's super sharp and perfect for making tools. If you study the flakes carefully, it's obvious that humans made them. You can see where they struck them and the feathered edges that come from being carefully chipped. That means people were not only crafting tools here, but they also had access to obsidian that came from incredibly far away. It was likely possible through a huge trade network that spanned across the continent. For over 100 years, people have guessed that ancient societies might have existed beneath the Great Lakes, but no one had proof. That's why work on this submerged archaeological site is so important. A team of researchers has been trying to learn more about the 10,000-year-old ruins and the civilization that left them behind for over a decade now. Lake Huron's icy water acted like a time capsule that helped preserve things for thousands of years. So far, researchers have found not only unique stone tools, but also ancient trees with roots still intact and underwater peat bogs that preserved seeds and leaves. It was like an Ice Age version of Pompeii, a scene frozen in time. These discoveries are also helping scientists create new technologies and ways to do underwater archaeology. They've engaged sonars, underwater robots, and divers so far. Now, it's pretty cool that the tools they found on the Alpena Amberley Ridge were way smaller than other tools from the same era found nearby. That might mean a different group of people lived here, and they had their own unique way of life. Even the peat bogs they found, which are about 9,500 years old, hold secrets. They're full of pine needles, seeds, and leaves that could reveal what the environment was like back then. Usually, stuff like this breaks down quickly on land, but the cold freshwater preserved it. The Michigan team is working with scientists in Cambridge, England, to extract DNA from the remains. If it works, it could finally confirm what animals lived there, and maybe even more. There are still years of discovery on this prehistoric Great Lakes site ahead. Another famous submerged archaeological site is the lost city of Pavlo Petri. Archaeologists think it is the oldest sunken city in the world they've found and made official so far. Pavlopatri is around 5,000 years old. That means it existed even before the legendary Greek heroes in Homer's stories. Scientists first spotted it way back in 1904, and then mostly forgot about it until 1967, when Nicholas Fleming rediscovered it. He described it as a Bronze Age city now lying under about 10 to 13 feet of water. A year later, he returned with a team of scientists to study the ruins. Over 6 weeks, using just hand tapes and a basic grid, they managed to map out the city. They found that it covered almost 1,000 feet by 500 feet and had at least 15 buildings, courtyards, 5 streets, 2 tombs, and around 37 small stone graves. They also found signs that the ruins continued onto the nearby island of Pavlopatri itself. They dug up some amazing pottery, obsidian, and church blades, and even a tiny bronze figurine that may date all the way back to 2800 BCE. Most of the buildings, though, came from the period between 1650 and 1180 BCE. Then scientists left the site alone again until 2009. When a super team of researchers launched a new 5-year project to really dive deep into the history of Pavlopatri. This time, they had digital mapping tools and better diving equipment, so they could explore and even excavate underwater. They found another 97,000 square feet of buildings, including a large hall and hidden streets. Plus, they dug up even more pottery that showed people had been living in the city from about 3000 BCE to 1100 BCE, and that the city once had a population of 500 to 2,000 people. No one knows for sure how the city ended up underwater, but many scientists think it was because of an earthquake, maybe around 1000 BCE, or even as late as 375 CE. Because it's the oldest underwater city ever found, some people even believe Pavlopatri might have inspired the legend of Atlantis. Another contestant for the Atlantis title lies near Japan. Back in 1986, a local diver was exploring the waters near the Ryukyu Islands when he found a giant structure made of perfectly shaped steps and sharp edges. It was 82 feet underwater. Today, the Yonaguni Monument is one of the most mysterious underwater sites on the planet. The structure is nearly half a football field in size. It looks like a massive stone pyramid with layers of platforms and steps stacked one on top of another. No one really knows where it came from or who built it. Some experts think the monument might be more than 10,000 years old, which would make it older than the Egyptian pyramids. One theory is that it could be the last remains of a lost civilization called Mu, a mythical Pacific society kind of like Atlantis. Others believe an ancient culture that lived in Japan as early as 12,000 BCE might have built it. But many scientists and geologists are skeptical about this possible underwater ancient civilization, even though Yonaguni has narrow passageways, arched openings, and right angles that almost look like city blocks. They say that the site looks a lot like natural rock formations, like the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, for example. The whole monument is still connected to a bigger chunk of bedrock, which means it wasn't built piece by piece. And the way the layers of rock are stacked probably has more to do with earthquakes and tectonic movement. It's located in the very active Pacific Ring of Fire. One marine geologist kept going back down there, and every time he found something new. He says he spotted tool marks in the rock, symbols carved into stone faces, and even rock formations shaped like animals. He believes these carvings point to a culture that came from mainland Asia. He said he had identified 10 different structures off Yonaguni, including a ruined castle, a triumphal arch, 5 temples, and even a huge museum. These buildings seem to be connected by roads and channels, and some parts are surrounded by what could be giant stone walls. The explorer believes the city is at least 5,000 years old, based on stalactites found in underwater caves nearby, which would have only formed after the caves flooded. His supporters say they have never seen an earthquake create shapes like this, above or below water. But skeptics blame it all on erosion
and insists that whirling underwater currents and sea creatures left holes in the rock. Now, if you want to form your own opinion about it, the spot is open for visitors, and it's definitely a super fun diving experience.
This area might just be the most important spot in America right now, as it is worth over $1 trillion. There's something incredibly valuable hidden right here at Thacker Pass, and it is going to shake things up, not just in Nevada, but in the US economy and its global relations. The McDermott Caldera is a massive area, about 28 miles long by 22 miles wide, stretching across northern Nevada and southern Oregon. It's in Humboldt County, a quiet, rural place with just one main city that's going to change a lot in the next 5 to 10 years. That's because they found white gold there. We're talking about lithium. And to explain why this metal is so important, we need a scale. On one side, we place a chunk of lithium, and on the other, an apple. What do you think will happen? If both have the same volume, the scale is going to tip toward the apple. That's because lithium is super light. Its density is about 0.3 ounces per cubic inch, which makes it the lightest solid you can find at room temperature. Lithium is also extremely reactive. That means it combines with other elements very easily, and it can catch fire just as easily. Mix it with water, fire. Expose it to air, yep, fire again. But when you combine its lightness with its high reactivity, you get a material that's perfect for batteries. Like the one powering your smartphone, laptop, or even your electric car. Nevada's been hiding this treasure for about 16 million years. The McDermott Caldera used to be a volcanic hotspot, spewing molten rock and creating a huge lake filled with mineral-rich waters. Over time, that lake dried up, leaving behind thick layers of clay loaded with lithium. Right now, Thacker Pass mine is sitting on one of the biggest untapped lithium reserves in the world, worth about $1.5 trillion. If everything goes as planned, they expect it to produce about 40,000 tons of high-quality lithium a year. And that's enough to make batteries for up to 800,000 electric cars. Like I mentioned earlier, this metal is the backbone of modern batteries. And with the world racing toward green energy, the demand for lithium is skyrocketing. Since 2020, its price has gone up more than 10 times, making it the most expensive battery metal in the world. That means it's way more expensive than magnesium, nickel, cobalt, and other materials used in rechargeable batteries. Right now, we're using about 1.16 million tons of lithium per year, and roughly 85% of it goes into making batteries, mostly for cars. Between 2030 and 2040, experts think we will need to double the money we're putting into production, from $94 billion to $188 billion. At the same time, investment in batteries will jump by over 200%, reaching $686 billion. Finally, by 2050, the demand for lithium is expected to be more than 10 times higher than what we're producing now. Sorry, I know that's a lot of numbers, but I just want to show how important Thacker Pass will be for the whole world. This mine is going to be key to keeping everything running. I mean, literally, since most of the future demand will be for things like cars, electric bikes, scooters, and renewable energy storage. Nevada could also be the epicenter of a global energy revolution, with the US aiming to cut pollution by 50% by 2030. A big part of that is replacing gas-powered vehicles with electric ones. And to make that happen, America is going to need a whole lot more lithium than it's producing right now. Nowadays, most of the metal used in the United States come from countries like Chile and Argentina. So if America wants to be a leader in this market, it really needs to invest more and more in projects like Thacker Pass. But there's another challenge. Finding lithium in a mine is one thing, but refining it is another story. Just like diamonds are carefully cut and shaped to bring out their sparkle and sold in rings and necklaces, something similar needs to be done with lithium. The raw material that comes from the mines has to be refined into a pure form that can actually be used in things like batteries. And China pretty much dominates this part of the market. and they're responsible for about 75% of global lithium-ion battery production. In other words, it doesn't matter if a country finds this powerful metal on its land. It will probably still need China to help refine it. So, the US is eager to strengthen its supply chain. In fact, they're so excited about this possibility that authorities have invested over $2 billion in loans into the Nevada project. Because of that, Thacker Pass could make the US a leader in lithium production worldwide. If their estimates are right, the McDermott caldera could hold nearly half of the world's known lithium reserves. It would almost double the reserves found in Bolivia's salt flats, for example, which used to hold the record for the world's largest deposit. This discovery is about to change Humboldt County for good. Those quiet streets surrounded by nature will never feel the same again. The mine will need about 2,000 workers who will probably move there from other cities. Those workers will need houses, hospitals, schools for their kids, and all the necessary services. Do you see how it's like a ripple effect? For every person hired to work on the project during construction, 6 more people will get hired in the state to support them. Thacker Pass is also going to have a huge impact on the economy, not just in Nevada, but all across the country. People expect the mine to be active for 35 years, and each year it's expected to generate over $2 billion. But here's the thing. In Thacker Pass, they'll be extracting lithium from clay, and this process has never been done on such a huge scale before. So it's kind of a hit or miss. But if it works, it could completely change the industry. Big question. Who's interested in all this? Well, we've got 3 big companies eyeing the lithium market in the US. First, there's ExxonMobil. The oil giant wants to start producing lithium by 2027, and they have plans to become the top supplier for electric vehicles by 2030. Then there's General Motors, the company behind big car brands like Chevrolet and Cadillac. They're so interested in this business that they agreed to pay $625 million for a 38% stake in Thacker Pass. And finally, Tesla. In 2023, they started building a factory in Texas to process lithium. It's all part of their plan to handle more of their supply chain themselves. Now that you know how important lithium is, you might be wondering, what if we run out? Well, that could happen, since it comes from mining and, just like gold, is a finite resource. But that doesn't mean we'd have to give up smartphones or electric cars. If we ever run out of this metal, we'd probably find new ways to produce batteries. In fact, some experts think thermal batteries could be the next big thing. They store extra energy from renewable resources like wind or solar power, which are very cheap. So they represent a new way of storing energy at a small fraction of the cost. Nowadays, they're primarily used for powering the production of steel, cement, and chemicals. Thermal batteries are also being used to heat and cool large buildings. However, more and more projects are focusing on bringing this technology into private spaces, like houses and apartments. Experts are optimistic that initiatives like these could make thermal batteries as well known as electric batteries, and they might soon become a regular part of our daily lives.
It's one of America's strangest contradictions. The Northeast, the cradle of cities, commerce, and crowds, hides a vast, empty wilderness at its northern edge. Millions live packed together to the south, yet up here, there's space for everyone, and almost no one takes it. How did this happen? How did the heart of America's most crowded region end up with one of its loneliest frontiers? The northeastern United States is home to more than 50 million people. It's one of the busiest and most densely packed regions in all of America. But almost 90% of those people live in the southern half of it. If you go north, past big cities and highways, everything will change. The noise will fade and the lights will thin out. You'll find yourself in a different world. A quiet land of forests, lakes, and mountains, stretching across northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. This is America's empty Northeast. And the mystery is simple. why is this part of one of the most crowded regions in the country so empty? First of all, let's take a look at New England itself. Massachusetts and Rhode Island are bursting at the seams, while Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire feel wide open. Connecticut sits in the middle, literally and figuratively. Massachusetts is basically the crowd magnet. Most people live around Boston and the cities nearby, Cambridge, Worcester, Springfield, where everything's close, busy, and built up. Rhode Island may be tiny, but it's got a big city density. Connecticut sits right between Boston and New York, and it shows. It has a busy coastline and quieter inland towns. It's not too crowded and not too empty. The middle ground. Once you cross into New Hampshire, things slow down. There's Manchester and Nashua, but most of the state is forests, lakes, and open land. Then there's Vermont, easily the least crowded region of the bunch. The Green Mountains slice through the middle, and most people live in small towns or villages. And Maine is huge and mostly empty. Most people stick to the southern coast. If you head north, you'll hit endless forests, lakes, and long, quiet roads. It's beautiful, but it feels like the edge of the map. Today, the northern half of the Northeast, northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, holds only about 4.9 million people. That's roughly the same as the population of the Boston metro area alone. To put that in perspective, if you take southern New York and southern New England, about the same land area, you get 10 times as many people living there. So, why the gap? It all comes back to geography, history, and economics, and how they've always worked together to keep the North empty. Let's start with the land itself. The thing is, the farther north you go, the rougher the land gets. Southern New England and downstate New York are full of rolling hills, wide valleys, and coastal plains. But then come the mountains. They're old, crumbling, and wild. In northern New York, you'll see the Adirondacks. To their east, the Green Mountains run up the middle of Vermont, stretching into Quebec. Keep going and you hit the White Mountains of New Hampshire. They're home to Mount Washington, famous for some of the most severe weather on Earth. And beyond that, the western Maine Mountains roll on toward Canada. Those aren't gentle hills, they're real barriers, and they owe their shape to one of the most powerful forces in Earth's history: ice. During the last ice age, huge glaciers covered this land. When they finally retreated, they carved out deep valleys and left behind thin, rocky soil. Later, the basins filled with water, creating thousands of lakes and ponds. It's a beautiful but difficult land to live on. Farming never stood a chance here the way it did farther south, where the soil is way richer. So the mountains stayed wild, covered in dense forests that even today stretch for miles. Northern Maine and the Adirondacks together make up one of the largest continuous forests east of the Mississippi. For centuries, people have come here to cut timber, fish, or hunt, but never in great numbers. And then there's the weather. Up here, winters are long, dark, and cold. Snow piles up early and doesn't leave easily. Summers are short, and the growing season is barely long enough to farm. It's not exactly a place that says, "Come start a new life." But of course, some people did. And here's where history comes into play. Long before Europeans arrived, this land was home to indigenous nations. The Abenaki, living across Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, had complex trade routes, connecting their communities all the way from modern Quebec to Massachusetts. Farther west, the powerful Iroquois Confederacy extended its influence toward the Adirondacks, controlling vast hunting grounds and trade routes. Then came the Europeans. In the 1600s, French explorers and fur traders pushed south from Quebec. They set up outposts along rivers and lakes that linked the region to Canada. They saw opportunity: furs, fish, timber, but not farmland. The dense forests and harsh winters kept settlements small and scattered. The English, expanding north from the Massachusetts Bay Colony, took to the coast. They settled in southern Maine and New Hampshire, but going inland was another story. Between the cold, the forests, and the resistance from native nations, their progress was slow and dangerous. For more than a century, the interior of the northern Northeast stayed wild. Later, around the 1760s, the British took control of the region. Land speculators moved in, especially in Vermont, which both New York and New Hampshire claimed as their own. The overlapping claims led to chaos, and eventually, Vermont declared itself an independent republic in 1777. For 14 years, it existed on its own until it joined the United States in 1791 as the 14th state. New Hampshire pushed inland from the coast, building towns in the valleys between its granite mountains. Maine, meanwhile, spent centuries as parts of Massachusetts. Its economy ran on timber and shipbuilding. Trees turned into masts and planks for the growing British and later American navies. And in northern New York, the Adirondacks remained a wild frontier long after the rest of the state filled up. The land was too rugged and the winters too fierce. Logging, mining, and later tourism would bring people north, but never in huge numbers. By the mid-1800s, the southern parts of New England were booming. Cities were growing, factories were humming, and immigrants were arriving in large numbers. But the northern regions stayed quiet. So as we now know, the mountains are the first big barrier. They make everything harder: travel, building, farming, and surviving winter. The soil is thin, rocky, and poor. And what's underneath isn't much better. The region doesn't have rich mineral deposits or coal seams like the Appalachians farther south. Without valuable resources to mine or easy land to farm, there wasn't much reason for settlers to stay. That was one of the reasons why the economy never took off. The empty Northeast never became a center of industry. Southern New England had rivers that powered early factories, ports connected it to global trade, and the cities attracted millions of immigrants. Northern New England and northern New York had none of that. They had lumber, granite, and paper mills, all useful, but those industries didn't create huge cities. Even today, the economy up there relies on the same resources, along with tourism. People come to hike, ski, fish, and escape city life, but most don't stay year-round. Towns fill up in summer and fall, then empty out when the snow starts falling. A few small cities, Portland, Burlington, Manchester, thrive, but there's no Boston or New York up here. You won't find massive universities, corporate headquarters, or international airports to pull in young people and families. In fact, some states have gone so far as to pay people to move there. Maine and Vermont have both launched programs offering money to remote workers who relocate. That's a pretty desperate attempt to reverse decades of population decline. Today, this empty Northeast holds just about 1% of America's population. It's a land of deep woods, icy lakes, and quiet towns. The wilderness never really left this region. But that stillness is also what makes this place so special. The rest of the Northeast is filled with constant noise and motion. Meanwhile, the North is a reminder of what the region once was: wild, cold, and untamed. That's how the heart of America's most crowded region remains one of its last true frontiers. The Museum of Bad Art, or MOBA in short, used to be located in an old basement in Dedham, Massachusetts. And currently, you can find it in Somerville, Massachusetts. It only accepts art pieces that are so bad you just can't ignore them. Their collection includes portraits. Get it? That's the name they use for portraits. And some really outrageous landscapes. There's also the MOBA Zoo, featuring really unfortunate depictions of our furry friends. Like any self-respecting museum, they also have a gift shop where you can purchase some prints, postcards, or even a coffee mug with your favorite bad art. Speaking of really unique experiences, how would you like to spend time in jail without actually having to break the law? In Scotland, there's a place called Inverary Jail. It's an actual former prison that dates back to the 1800s, where tourists can experience 19th century jail life. There are characters dressed in authentic costumes that make it even more realistic. You can participate in courtroom trials and work with other inmates. In Suwon, South Korea, visitors can check out a theme park built around the history and culture of toilets. It was opened in memory of the former city mayor. He dedicated a lot of time and local resources to improving the city's public toilets and sewer system. It goes without saying that this place has a lot of toilet-themed art documenting the world's restroom culture. You'll find everything here, from men's and women's bathroom signs from around the globe to photographs of public toilets, and information about the importance of sanitary facilities. A designer store in the middle of the desert? If you happen to pass by Texas, you'll find a Prada store on an empty stretch of US 90 outside of the small town of Valentine, about 150 miles from El Paso. Two Berlin artists wanted to offer Texans the high-end experience. Sort of. That's because the curious store has no door to access it, and its 20 left-foot shoes and 6 purses set on display. Surprisingly, the store was built with the blessing of Miuccia Prada herself, the head designer of the brand. Can you imagine living in a city where you have your own beach access to a lagoon that leads directly into the sea? That might be possible in the near future, if you don't mind relocating to Sabah Al Ahmad Sea City in Kiran, Kuwait. This engineering masterpiece was inaugurated in 2016. Its canals form 120 miles of artificial shoreline. All those human-made islands were built by excavating large channels in the desert rather than using reclaimed land, as was done previously in similar conditions. Before visiting this museum, you have to take off the shoes you've been wearing and put on special slippers that won't damage the artwork, because it's everywhere. It's called the Electric Ladyland, and it's the world's first museum of fluorescent art. The owner, Nick Palladino, exhibits here a lot of his own sculptures and even naturally luminescent rocks, along with other human-made glowing objects. One portion of this art gallery features paintings that shift color under UV light. The soundtrack is awesome too. You'll hear a lot of the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix. Upside-down houses seem to be quite a tourist attraction. You can find them in many countries, such as Japan, Poland, Germany, and Austria. One of the best ones to visit is located in Malaysia. It's called Rumah Terbalik Upside Down House. It uses recycled wood and other natural materials to recreate a local atmosphere. It was opened back in 2012 and soon became a popular tourist attraction with its upside-down furniture and wacky household appliances. There's even an upside-down car parked in the garage. A spa-themed park located in Hakone, Japan, provides tourists with an interesting array of hot springs. Some of them are quite unusual, especially the unique noodle bar, where visitors can literally swim in a bowl of ramen. It's not for tasting though, since it's still a public space. The Dead Marsh in Namibia offers a cool experience which makes you think you're frozen in time. Since there's no water here and temperatures are really high, this sparse forest is made out of skeleton trees that haven't been alive for more than 600 years. Since there's little to no humidity, the remaining vegetation cannot fall apart, leaving behind this odd natural landscape. It even became the set for some sci-fi movies. Spoiler alert! But the paper house located north of Boston, Massachusetts is actually a house made completely out of paper, furniture and all. It was built by Ellis F. Stenman, the man behind the machine that makes paper clips. Back in the 1920s, he basically wanted a 2-room summer home for him and his family. It took him over 20 years to complete, since the house was made of about 100,000 newspapers. Just make sure you don't bring any lighters. Cappadocia Cave Hotel in Turkey is a great place to stay for both history buffs and people who are into modern and luxurious decor. All of the rooms and suites are located inside the local cave dwellings dating back to the Roman and Byzantine periods. Cappadocia is also famous for its hot air balloon tours. One of the reasons is because it's not very windy here and the view of the city is really beautiful, especially during sunset. The small Indian town of Deshnok certainly wouldn't be on your vacation list if you don't like rats. A 14th century legend has it that the rats living here are to be protected and nurtured. Over 20,000 rats live inside this famous location these days. Since they've been living there for so long, the rats are quite friendly with both locals and tourists. The Battle of the Oranges is a local festival happening each year in late February in a small Italian town of Ivrea. The local myth has it that the Carnaval de Ivrea started back in the Middle Ages. That's when locals stood against a hated ruler by throwing oranges at him in protest. It sounds like fun to join thousands of participants gathering there for 3 days to throw some oranges. Just don't forget to duck. Socotra Island in Yemen was separated from mainland Africa more than 6 million years ago. That's probably one of the reasons why this secluded island looks more like the set of a fantasy movie than a real location. The island has some incredible and unique flora. Most of the plants and trees that grow here are not found anywhere else in the world. Like, for example, the ancient twisted dragon's blood tree or the bulbous bottle tree. Japan's Tashirojima is rightly nicknamed Cat Island, since it has a population of 100,000 humans and almost 4 times as many felines. The cats were initially brought here since the island produced a lot of silk, and mice like silkworms a lot. More so, the cats were seen as a sign of good luck. There are even cat-shaped cabins for tourists to settle in, and it probably goes without saying that dogs aren't allowed there. There are about 1,700 weirdly shaped hills in the middle of Bohol Island in the Philippines. They're so unique that you might easily mistake them for human-made. They are, however, part of the UNESCO heritage, since they are naturally made out of coral deposits and shaped by rainwater erosion. Because of their quirky look, they earned the nickname of Chocolate Hills, since during the dry season, their exterior goes from lush green to brown. Big fan of cascading pools? Then make sure to check out another UNESCO World Heritage Site located in Pamukkale, Turkey. The name means Cotton Castle in Turkish. It's set in the ancient ruins of Hierapolis, a city that was built around the pools. Their crystal clear waters cascade from natural springs down to white travertine terraces. The view is so beautiful that you won't know what to do at first. Take a picture or jump in.
Ah, Phoenix. This sizzling gem in the Sonoran Desert isn't just another American city. It's more like a giant oven where you can throw a party, as long as you don't forget the ice. Seriously, if you find yourself here in the summer, brace yourself for some serious heat. We're talking about temperatures that regularly pass 100 degrees. And in 2024, Phoenix hit 110 degrees 55 times during the summer, tying the record set just the year before. Now, I get it if you're not a fan of hot weather, but apparently a lot of people love living in a sauna. Phoenix ranks as the 5th largest city in the United States, and it is the capital and most populous city in Arizona, with 1.7 million residents as of 2024. And if we're talking about the metropolitan area, also known as the Valley of the Sun, the population is almost 5 million. Yet, good luck finding someone actually born here. Out of every 4 Phoenix residents, 3 were born somewhere else. Believe it or not, Phoenix wasn't always this bustling, crowded place. It became one. A few decades ago, it was just a sleepy little dot on the map. Back in the 1940s, the population was around 65,000. It wasn't even close to cracking the top 100 list of the largest U.S. cities. Now, at that time, Phoenix was mostly an agricultural hub, and its economy revolved around what they called the 5 C's: cotton, citrus, cattle, climate, and copper. But things really started to change in the 1950s thanks to one life-changing invention. Drumroll please? The air conditioner. Actually, it was the portable version that came out in 1945, created by an American inventor named Robert Sherman. Phoenix residents owe a lot to Robert for making life bearable during scorching summers. Before AC, people in Phoenix would literally move their beds outside and build sleeping porches. They'd protect that kind of outdoorsy space with light curtains or some kind of net to keep the dust and bugs out. Fun. Anyway, the point is that the air conditioner played a big part in making Phoenix an easier place to live.
Since the 1940s, this city in Arizona has transformed from a dusty little town into a sprawling urban jungle, and it's still one of the top 10 fastest-growing metro areas in the U.S. The best part is, it looks like that won't change anytime soon, since this 519-square-mile metropolis is surrounded by rolling desert, with plenty of room to keep growing as far as the eye can see. So, who's dropping everything to move to Phoenix? Well, Californians are the city's biggest fans. According to a recent survey, a third of all new renters moving to Phoenix come from Los Angeles. Okay, that survey might not be the most reliable since it only applies to the source's clients, but it does line up with U.S. Census Bureau data from 2019, which says that 70,000 Californians moved to Arizona in the previous year. The connection between Phoenix and LA is so strong that some people even call Phoenix the next LA. You've got to give Phoenix credit for capitalizing on its proximity to Southern California. The city offers lower taxes, fewer regulations, and lower costs of living, which makes it a magnet for businesses, especially in high-tech and service industries. So, in the 90s, Phoenix was considered a non-stop generator of jobs. In the last few years, we've seen the number of jobs only go up, and the unemployment rate has dropped by nearly half, going from 6.3 in January 2014 to 3.4 in the same month in 2024. Now, when it comes to big city problems, you can't avoid talking about traffic. But here's another reason why Phoenix is a dream city. It doesn't even come close to the traffic nightmares you find in places like LA. Estimates show that people in Los Angeles waste about 119 hours a year just sitting in traffic. But in Phoenix, it's more like 61 hours. Huge difference, huh? And let's not even start talking about the money people waste just sitting in traffic. In LA, drivers burn through about $2,440 worth of gas per year. In Phoenix, they waste 25 gallons of fuel, which ends up costing about $952. Yeah, that's still a lot of cash, but compared to LA, come on, that's a steal. Phoenix being okay in terms of traffic might have a lot to do with how the city was designed. Just take a look at a map of Phoenix. You'll notice it looks like someone took a ruler and drew perfectly straight lines for the roads. That's because the city was laid out in a grid system. This setup makes it so much easier to get around, especially compared to cities full of confusing twists, U-turns, and one-way streets. It just simplifies things, whether you're a local or a tourist. Plus, Phoenix has nice wide streets. Most cities have one major road and a bunch of narrow streets that just can't handle heavy traffic. But Phoenix has wide roads everywhere. So, when the freeways get jammed, you can just hop onto a parallel street and still get to work without stressing out too much. When you look at all the job opportunities and the relatively smooth traffic, it's no wonder people are willing to put up with the heat and move to Phoenix. But don't get it twisted, the heat is no joke. It is really, really hot and sunny out there. We're talking about 300 days of sunshine on average, or about 85% daylight hours per year. But once again, Phoenix has made the best of it, and all that constant sunshine has turned Phoenix into one of the top solar energy cities in the country. Now, you may be wondering, a city in the middle of the desert with barely any rain, do they actually have enough water? Well, they do. Phoenix has its water situation pretty well sorted out, thanks to multiple sources. I mean, they don't rely on rain alone, which is a good thing because, desert life. Most of their water comes from way up north and east of the valley, where snow melts off the mountains and flows into giant reservoirs, storing it up for those dry years. But most of Phoenix's water comes from the Salt River Project, which brings water through canals and pipelines from the Salt and Verde rivers. Then there is the Central Arizona Project, which transports water all the way from the Colorado River. They even get a bit of water from underground wells. And Phoenix doesn't want to waste a drop, so they're smart about recycling, reusing treated water to keep parks green, and even recharging their groundwater. Since Phoenix is all about sunny skies nearly every day of the year, it's normal that people can get a little moody when it actually rains. But here's the thing. Phoenix always gets a surprise up its sleeve, even when it comes to bad weather. When it rains in the deserts, locals get treated to this unique earthy smell. It's thanks to the creosote bush, a desert plant that releases an amazing fragrance when the rain hits it. People describe it as the smell of rain, and honestly, it's one of those fresh, clean scents that makes you forget you're in the desert for a second. And if you've never stopped to think about why Phoenix is called Phoenix, well, it's based on that famous legend of the bird that rises from the ashes. Now, after knowing all the special things about this city and its unique ability to turn challenges into advantages, we can say the name couldn't have been better chosen. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.